There's only one way to wake up in the morning.
How the heck are you?
Yep, that's it. Miller
You know what? I'll try to bring you back some fish.
and Moulton.
Okay, you drop it off at the front door.
Probably in the mailbox. We'll pack ice.
Broadcasting live from the Kobe Cooling Remote Studios, where it's always cool and comfortable.
Oh, I like
It's up to you now. It's up to you.
I like it.
Now, the best local sports show this town has ever heard. Here's Miller and Moulton.
You're live. How the heck are you? Miller and Moulton on this Friday, the 10th of July. Thanks so much for being with us. Southwest Florida's Fox Sports Radio. By now, you should, have the gist down. Miller Moulton streaming where? MillerMoulton.com. Miller Moulton broadcasting where? Miller Moulton's YouTube and Twitch.tv channels. It's kind of the whole, bundling, marketing. We're a brand, Mark. We're a brand.
Well, and, yesterday my daughter had my phone out and she was filming me around the house, and I told her, delete that now. It's bad for the brand. Not that much filming.
Thank you, Bryson DeChambeau. All right, well played. Well played. 479-5551 is how you can chime into the show and take on the brand. 479-5551 is the Williamson Brothers Marine and Roofing text and talk line. Well, let's see. Anything happen between the end of the show yesterday and this morning? Anything?
David, there's part of me that thinks we should just be on 24 hours because every time we go off the air, bad things happen, David.
Woo-wee. And to think that you were a little depressed by the college football guest that we had on in the 7 o'clock hour yesterday.
Well, because he painted a picture that when the things that happened yesterday happened, I can't say I was at all surprised. I mean, after that conversation and him talking to every coach saying, yeah, I don't know how we start on time. Well, we had already talked about what are we doing with non-conference games? What are we doing with Ohio State, Oregon? That was the big one on the docket.
Brandon Marcello of 24/7 Sports yesterday said, I've talked to a few dozen Division I coaches, and there's not a one that thinks the season will start on time. And then about a handful of hours later, we get word that the Big Ten's like, season's not going to start on time. In fact, we're going to cancel all our non-conference games. And there's a couple of other conferences that apparently are going to do the same. They just didn't make it official yesterday.
And for the ones that haven't made any announcement, who are they going to play?
Well, they could scramble and fill in the games, quite frankly. I mean, first off, the Big Ten saying we're going to go conference only. They didn't say, by the way, are we just going to stick with the 9 games we currently have?
There you go. There you go.
Okay, we're going to go conference only. Well, you got 14 teams. In theory, everybody could play everybody. That'd be 13 games. Now, we know they're not going to do that, but you could add another game
a 10th.
if you want.
A 10th.
Now, my guess is the conferences that are playing 9 games will not. They'll say, you know what, 9 out of 12 is not bad. That's 3/4 of a season. That's pretty decent revenue. All right. But, now granted, some of those teams only have 4 home games. Of their 9, it's 4 home, 5 away. And that might be something even, Mark, that they do. They may even it up to be 10 games. We're going to add a 10th game so that everybody gets 5 home, 5 away, and everybody gets 5 quote-unquote gates, whatever the gate may be. The gate could be 0, or the gate could potentially be however many it is that they allow in their stadiums, but at least then it's quote-unquote equitable, fair.
Yes, and I think I would venture it's more likely to go to 8 than 10 based on when they start. I hate to say it, but if you were going to give me a choice between a larger number and a smaller number with games being played, I'm going to bet on the smaller number right now. I think that's a safe bet.
There are 13 weekends in September, October, and November. All right, keep that in mind. Because right now, conference championship games are scheduled the first Saturday or first weekend, because the Pac-12, I think, has theirs on Friday. But the first weekend of December is conference championship weekend. Now, there is some talk about pushing that back a week and invading the Army-Navy territory. I mean, some conferences have already discussed that. Nobody's formalized it yet, but that's to give themselves even another week. But if you think about it right now, Mark, that these conferences have 13 weeks in September, October, and November. Now, if they're going to sit out the first two, because on a lot of schedules, the first conference games are not until the third weekend of September. Now 13 becomes 11. So now you're fitting 9 games in 11 weeks.
Not going to argue with how many weeks there are. I am just merely saying
Right.
that if I were to bet on more games or less games right now, I would bet on less. Now, if you want me to play glass half full, I'll do it in this regard. I actually think that there's something about a college football season with just 10 conference games that is the most amazing, perfect college football scenario for 2020. And I don't mean because of COVID. I mean because of where college football is right now, that I love the idea of, hey, let's find out who the best team in every conference is, period. There is something terrific about this. This reminds me of pre-BCS days. This reminds me of when the Rose Bowl mattered, David. And I actually think that it would put so much attention on every conference game that I know it won't happen all the time, but for 1 year, if you could tell me we're going to get 10 games per conference, line it up. This looks like a lot of fun.
Well, the other thing I think it could do, Mark, is that it could eliminate a good chunk of the beauty pageant at the end of the year. That it will be really difficult. Now, it's been done, and in fact, it's been done in the Big Ten, where the conference champion was not the team that represented the Big Ten in the playoff.
But
One of the main won the conference.
One of the main reasons was Penn State lost to Pitt.
Right.
That was their game that kept
Correct.
them. Wasn't anything in the Big Ten per se. It was that they lost to Pitt, and the people doing the work couldn't get over that loss. That game was more important than beating the Buckeyes at the end of the day to this committee, because they had the magical number. They had 2, and we don't do 2.
No, not in the L column. We
Nope.
do not.
So remember, there was one thing about this that actually, you can't say could happen in this because they're not playing that game.
Well, and that's my point. Like, let's just imagine this year we have a conference-only season, and the exact same thing happens as happened in 2016, in which Ohio State and Penn State end up tied because Penn State that year got whacked by Michigan. So they were tied in terms of conference record, but Penn State won the tiebreaker. So they went to the Big Ten title game. Well, it will be very difficult. There at least in 2016 was an argument. The one team was 11-1, the other was 10-2 before the conference championship game. And even though the team with 2 losses had beaten the team with 1 loss, there at least was an argument. Plus, also, there was a crazy finish to the Ohio State-Penn State game. Ohio State was leading the whole game. Penn State blocks a field goal, returns it for a touchdown with about 4.5 minutes to go to take the lead and win. So, there was an argument to be made. But if they both finish 9-1 in conference-only play, and the one team has beaten the other head-to-head, well, don't know what to tell you. You can think the team that loses the tiebreaker is better, but the committee is not going to pick them to represent that conference. They're just not. They're going to say, sorry, you're on the outside looking in this year. Bama, if they go 8-1 or whatever the case may be in the SEC, and they lose to Auburn or LSU or A&M, and that's why that team represents the West in the SEC championship game, Bama wouldn't win the beauty contest this year. Now, just because conference championship weekend is scheduled when it is, it doesn't mean it can't be moved.
No, and I think it could be moved 2 weeks. I think realistically it could be moved 2 weeks, David. You could move it the week past Army Navy. I know that there are exams and all of these things, but let's be frank here. No one's going to school. They can do this online test whenever the hell they want, and they can have whoever they want take it for them, whether they go to North Carolina, Michigan, or Vanderbilt. It doesn't matter.
Well, and also there's a lot of talk that the semester is going to end right around Thanksgiving break. Whether the semester actually ends, but the students roll on campus. A lot of schools are already talking about your kids, when they come home on Thanksgiving break, are going to be home until whenever classes resume in January.
And that's at least 2 schools that I know of off the top of my head, and I know it's more than that. So you're onto something there, David.
And so now they don't want to push it back 2 weeks. They don't. But they are seemingly open to pushing it back one more week to the second weekend in December and, forcing Army Navy to play a noon game that day, which is how it used to be about 8-10 years ago. Army Navy was at noon on CBS, and then at 4, it was the SEC championship game. And whenever Army Navy ended, that's when CBS began their pregame show. And they could do it again for a year.
And remember, it's Army Navy. They don't throw the ball. They'll get that sucker done by 3 o'clock.
Oh, yeah. I mean, honestly, they could, yeah.
It's done by 3. It's a 3-hour. If it kicked at noon, it'd be over 3:15 latest.
Yeah, the latest that game has ended, because it's a 3 o'clock. We go on the air at 3, and we kick around 3:08, 3:10. That game has not made it to 6:30 in terms of the actual game. A lot of times, if the game is still being played at 6:20, we jokingly look at one another and go, wow, long one this year.
We'd be starting the 4th quarter in Big 12 action.
But the ACC and Pac-12 are rumored to be going along with the Big Ten and going along with it quickly. They may not announce it for another however many days, but the thought is that they're in lockstep, the ACC and the Pac-12, with what the Big Ten did yesterday. The SEC, Greg Sankey has called for a face-to-face meeting with all 14 athletic directors Monday. Now, remember, 1, we don't have a whole lot of face-to-face meetings anymore in our society. 2, we certainly don't have it during the coronavirus. So that in and of itself is pretty interesting. He doesn't want to do this on Zoom, where people can hit the mute button, or, I was on a Zoom call yesterday in which I kind of made my video go away because I just felt like it. I'm like, I don't want everybody staring at me. Boom. I just, had the little green thing up there. I'll just sit here and listen to everybody else. Put it on mute, put the green screen up there. That's just fine for me. My name's up there. They know I'm part of the meeting. People don't need to see me. I'm laying in my bed with my eyes closed.
They don't need to hear you either.
No, they don't hear me. I might fall asleep and start snoring like I did on you one day when we were testing out the Twitch line. So they don't need that. So, which I just thought that was interesting. A face-to-face. I mean, this is like, it's like a Godfather meeting here.
It actually is very much like a Godfather meeting, because all of the athletic directors will have someone driving them there. And I don't know who's going to get the gun or the cannoli at this point.
Right.
Does Vandy have somebody to send to this meeting?
Well, they'll just point to somebody in the office and goes, who's the highest ranking person left? Are you? What's technically, you're an assistant SID, right? Why don't you go? All right. Don't say anything. Take good notes.
Johnny Mack already has a question in the Twitch chat room regarding Notre Dame. It looks like the ACC is going to be their friend if this goes to conference play. It is. Yeah. It looks like it.
Okay. We got to talk about this, though. This is fascinating. There are major ramifications to this, which I don't think people yesterday were thinking about and talking about. So that if the ACC cancels non-conference games, some of them are against small conference group of 5 schools, paydays, or FCS schools, paydays. Legally, you can, because of the coronavirus, cancel these games and not replace them. All right. And these schools don't owe those other schools any money. Now, the other schools may complain and what have you, but likely, lawyers yesterday said that in all likelihood, the best you'll be able to do is get the game rescheduled. But yeah, you're going to have a budget shortfall this year. You just lost $1 million or whatever the payday was going to be. But Mark, think about it. if they cancel their game with you, but then that week they were supposed to play you, Wake Forest decides, although they're already on Notre Dame's schedule, but you know what I'm getting at here. Florida State, say, has an open week, and they decide, okay, we'll help Notre Dame out here. We'll play Notre Dame. The school that didn't get the payday is going to be like, hey, we don't care if you paid Notre Dame or not, but legally that means you got to cut us a check, just so you know. You can't drop us and play somebody else and have us not get
I think Notre Dame would write those checks gladly. You're talking about they play what? How many ACC games do they play? 5 or 4?
It's 5.
They have 5. Okay, so let's see if they want to get 4 more, whatever the number is, 5 more games. First off, let's just pick out the lowest paydays to the FCS team, somewhere between $500,000 and $750,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's just, for sake of argument, say $750,000, and we multiply that times 5. That's $3.75 million. NBC would gladly pay that money to those schools to get Notre Dame a schedule. So I don't David, your point is incredibly valid, and I know that it's right. But it's a drop in the bucket for Notre Dame and for NBC. Because if I'm the ACC, hey, I'll let you in. I'll let you compete for a championship this year. You've got to give us some. I mean, you either don't play or you pay these teams off because you're getting NBC money. I think there's plenty of ways to make sure Notre Dame gets theirs and gets to play. I think it helps the ACC conference. I actually yesterday for a half a second went, is there a chance that Rutgers is not playing? Is there a chance that Maryland is not playing? I mean, I literally, if I'm the Big Ten yesterday, I'm calling Notre Dame and saying, all right, you want in once and for all? But I know they couldn't dump anybody. But, man, I wanted to trade Maryland back to the ACC where they belong and just put Notre Dame in the West right now.
It would be something in John Swofford's swan song year if he could take advantage of the coronavirus and just say to Notre Dame for 1 year, you're a part of the conference. You're eligible for the conference championship. Come on, let's do it. Because the thought is, Mark, that these are the games that Notre Dame's going to lose on their schedule minimum. If the other conferences follow suit with what the Big Ten did. First off, they had 1 game scheduled this year against a Big Ten school. It was at Wisconsin. Pretty sexy game.
Yep.
2 Pac-12 games, though, Stanford and USC. And then they had an SEC game. Week 2, Notre Dame's hosting Arkansas. So if the other Power 5 conferences join in with what the Big Ten did, then that's 4 games right there. Now, that's not even talking about, will they keep Western Michigan on the schedule? And, my guess is they'll still open with Navy, but it'll be interesting. Does Mike Oresco, remember, Navy's part of the AAC now? If you're Navy, you're saying to Mike Oresco, hey, we got Notre Dame coming to our place.
If you're the AAC, you're going, really?
Right.
I'm losing my non-conference games?
Well, and that game now could get moved to prime time. That could be you don't even know how many games are even going to be played on September 5th right now. If I'm the AAC, I'm like, listen, if medically, Navy, if you're comfortable with this, Notre Dame, by the way, boasted just 2 days ago, they haven't had a single positive test.
Right.
Amongst all their athletes that are on campus. They haven't had 1 positive test. So if I'm Mike Oresco and if Navy's comfortable with it, I'm like, yeah. Absolutely. This game will be in prime time. Heck, this could be the only game of the day on Saturday of Labor Day weekend for all we know. NBC could have a big day that day. They could go Kentucky Derby right into Navy Notre Dame. They might be the only sports on television that day if this keeps up.
There'll be golf and NASCAR.
Well, that's true. But could be the only football anyway.
That is incredibly likely.
So there's lots of tentacles. There's lots of layers to this. But when the Big Ten announced they were doing what they did, you knew they were not going to be alone.
And here, to me, is the bigger question. Now, I think the AAC will play football. They consider themselves number 6. But you mentioned the MAC. You just happened to mention Western Michigan playing Notre Dame.
Right.
If the Big Ten's not playing the MAC,
Right.
Why is the MAC playing football?
Well,
David, I am 100% serious. Those MAC schools don't make any money.
Oh, no. In fact, we've gone over it over the last couple months, how many sports have been dropped by certain MAC schools already. Now, if you're the MAC, do you then consider moving your games like the Ivy League to the spring? I mean, I could argue if you're losing your marquee television games, okay, now maybe the MAC considers MACtion, those 3 Tuesdays and Wednesdays in November, they're marquee slots. But I could argue, if I'm the commissioner of the MAC, that we could sit down and move our schedule to the spring. Because first off, we don't have a ton of guys who are getting invited to combines and have legitimate pro aspirations. So doing that, yeah, it's going to affect a few guys, but it's not going to affect like the Power 5 conferences. And I think we have a chance of getting better TV exposure if we move our games to March and April. I'm with you. Mark, I'm interested in, like, what do you do if you're the Mountain West? And I know nobody cares, but right now the Mountain West is scheduled to have 3:30 Saturday, September 12th, Boise State at Air Force on CBS. Well, Boise State's their team. Boise State went 11-1 last year. Boise State is virtually everybody back. They think they're running the table, and that they're going to be standing there going, consider us for the number 4 spot. And they don't get 3:30 on CBS or 3:30 on NBC or, for that matter, 3:30 on Fox or ABC very often.
But, David, see, one of the ways that they were going to get to that game was by beating Florida State.
Yep.
That was probably the most important game on their schedule. That and BYU, but BYU's, they play in the same conference. So, BYU's an independent, right?
They are an independent.
Yeah. So you got BYU and you got Florida State. Now, you may still get BYU. I don't know. That's a whole nother.
Well, because they're like Notre Dame. I mean, this is a scheduling problem. I mean, they need all the games that they can. In fact, maybe Notre Dame and BYU schedule each other. One of the weeks that Notre Dame is scheduled to play Stanford, I think it's October 10th, Army just lost a game against, I think it was Princeton, on October 10th. It would not shock me at all if Notre Dame, salvages their schedule by, they already play Navy. Why not play Army? They used to play Army regularly. And if you're Army, you take that game.
Well, if you can get Navy, Army, and you've got 5 with the ACC, you could maybe get yourself somewhere. BYU and look at the Boise's of the world are going to be looking for games. UCF may be looking for a game. These schools will want games if they're not getting their non-conference gates.
Well, here, take a look at who does UCF play week 2, September 12th?
I think it's North Carolina, David.
Okay, well, if they lose that game, Notre Dame is likely going to lose their Arkansas game.
Week 2, they have FIU. Sorry, week 1's they have UNC to open, FIU the 12th, and then Georgia Tech the 18th.
Gotcha. But there's an opportunity here. Can you turn a negative into a positive if you're certain schools? Especially if you have a week that opens up that Notre Dame has the same week that opens up. I mean, you call them up and say, hey, we'll help you out. Because it's not, I know John Swofford said we're going to help Notre Dame out. How many of the head coaches and ADs in the conference want to all of a sudden add Notre Dame to their schedule? Particularly if they're not getting the benefit of a big home crowd. And some of these schools are going to be asked to go to Notre Dame. It's like, hold on a second. They're not a member of our conference. I got to add a road game against the top 10 team in the country? What? For what? For the good of the conference?
Wait a minute. Top 10 team in the country?
Yeah, this year. Notre Dame will be a top 10 team in the country. I think they will. I think they'll be the back end of the top 10. I think they'll be every bit as good as they were last year. And they were a top 15 team last year.
All right.
But also think about what this does. I mean, if you're these conferences, like why can't, I understand the Big Ten goes, we're only going to go conference games only. Well, a lot of that, this was done for travel, right? This was part of it. It was done for travel, and it was done to open up the schedule. But are you sure Iowa and Iowa State can't play? I mean, there's a part of me that thought, can we do conference games +1? That everybody gets a +1 and they get to figure out what the +1 is. I mean, this means Florida, if the ACC and or the SEC goes through with this, we don't get Florida State this year.
We haven't had Florida State in 3-4 years.
Yes, we have. It just hasn't been all that competitive. But you know what I mean. I mean, are we sure? I mean, you're college football. You sure you want to lose these games? I mean, I understand Georgia Tech hasn't been all that competitive lately, but we're going to lose that game. Clemson, South Carolina is not going to get played. That's kind of a big deal in that state.
It is.
I
They
mean,
haven't made those announcements yet, just the Big Ten.
I mean,
So
that's
maybe that's what they're sitting there thinking, David. Maybe there are, you just mentioned 3 really good regional games. Florida State, Clemson, South Carolina, Georgia Tech. I mean, these are big, important games inside their states. No question.
And for that matter, if you're USC, USC's like, we kind of play Notre Dame. That's a big deal. It's actually it's a game that has great historical significance, not just for our programs, but for college football. It helped make the game a coast-to-coast game.
Yeah, I understand. That one's done.
It's the final game of the year for both schools, too. I mean, it's after conference games are done.
Well, and it's a weekend they might need for conference games.
I
That's the bigger problem.
That's why I was a little surprised the Big Ten didn't go conference +1 and give everybody one game they can hold on to for whatever reason. Financial, rivalry, what have you. Miller and Moulton. Starting 5 is next. Bud Elliott's going to join us in an hour to talk about, well, all of this and a lot more as college football. Is chaos an appropriate word now?
Oh, yeah.
It's now officially chaos? Bud Elliott of 24/7 Sports an hour from now.
And former Huntington Blizzard defenseman Jared Bednar.
Come on, you gotta build him up a little more than that.
And
I mean,
current,
that's a banquet introduction right
current
there.
head coach of the Colorado Avalanche, one of the
There
teams
you
who
go.
have a legit shot to hoist Lord Stanley's Cup.
Yes, they do.
He'll join us at 25 minutes after 8. He sent me a text yesterday. He said, I got to do it a little early. Got to be somewhere. Got to be on a call at 6:45. It's
Okay.
mountain time. We're going mountain time.
Look at that. Okay, Coach.
All right, Coach, whatever you say. We'll
do
dump and chase at 8:25 with Jared Bednar.
Nice. Look at you.
Hey,
That
back-to-back hockey interviews. I'm pretty fired up, David.
Miller,
This hasn't happened on this show ever.
not since the Blades were in the Kelly Cup in like 2005. I think it's the last time it's happened. Miller and Moulton, thanks for being with us. Southwest Florida's Fox Sports Radio.
Oh. Yeah, I for a moment there, I'm like, boy, is this the day that you kick Rutgers or Maryland right out? Just call the ACC. Do you want Maryland back now? You can have them. They want to be back. You really want them back. Move Purdue to the east. Notre Dame in the west. It was a great 10-minute dream in my car. Do we go? By the way, did you see the NCAA statement on COVID?
Well, it was like, what, 2 sentences?
Yes.
And as generic could be.
Yes. All right, what do we want to do how do we want to do a college football poll today?
I don't know.
By the way, you know what the opening SEC game is then, don't you? Alabama hosting Georgia.
Yeah, good time. Yep.
It was money. That's the only reason they're in the Big Ten is the money. The Under Armour guy said we're going to go broke unless we go to the Big Ten.
Well, and for Big Ten Network, the reach also. It was to bring in Baltimore and D.C., 2 top 30 markets. And so it was done for the Big Ten Network. Of course, I remember like the first or second year they joined the Big Ten being in one of those 2 cities and walking into a sports bar and they didn't have it.
So, yeah. The AP is reporting, David. The Roman Catholic Church received at least $1.4 billion. Do you know this? In federal coronavirus aid using a special and unprecedented exemption to a U.S. rule that church leaders secured after lobbying the Trump administration.
Yep.
Well, I mean, Catholics, you're not surprising me here at all.
No.
That's a group that you guys can't surprise me anymore. What did they need it for? I mean, we pay all their shit every
Always
week.
Have.
They got more money than anybody.
Also, they're not for profit.
Well, that doesn't matter.
Yeah. Under Armour, you think we'll have Under Armour in 5 years? Think Under Armour will be around in 5 years?
I don't. I don't. That is, wow. Yeah, UCF's going to, if that happens, UCF loses Tech and UNC, and I guess FIU if they canceled non-con games. Oh, and Florida A&M late. And that's the other thing. You start doing this at the conference level like the AAC, you're going to just crush these HBSC or however you say it. That just kill
HBCU.
Just kill them.
26 minutes before the hour. Thanks so much for being with us, Miller and Moulton, Southwest Florida's Fox Sports Radio. Reminder, if you ever miss any part of the show or the show's a little too early for you, well, download our podcast. Every hour gets its own podcast, courtesy of Connecticut, Quality Water Systems of Southwest Florida, Bonita Beach Road and Bonita Springs. Great summer specials as they have every year, and they produce the best water that you can find anywhere. They have a revolutionary system. We've been customers, Miller and Moulton have, for over 30 years combined. Connecticut, proud sponsor of our podcasts, and I'll check them out, ConnecticutSWFL.com. Right now, time now for
the starting five. 5 big stories that you need to know. This is Miller and Moulton Starting 5. Fox Sports Radio and FoxSportsFM.com.
Big Ten announced yesterday that they're going to play just conference football games only this fall. Reportedly, the ACC and the Pac-12 are going to follow suit. The SEC has a big meeting on Monday. All 14 athletic directors are going to meet in person with Commissioner Greg Sankey to talk about life in the pursuit of happiness this fall. Some of the games that are lost if these conferences that have been mentioned decide they're not going to play non-conference games. Miami loses their game against Michigan State. We lose the Iowa State game, Ohio State at Oregon, Notre Dame at Wisconsin.
Florida State, Penn State, Virginia Tech. There's a bunch of sexy games and rivalries that we lose. South Carolina, Clemson, Georgia Tech. You get the idea. As for Notre Dame, who's not in a conference, what are they going to do? Well, they already play 5 ACC games a year, and the ACC has said to Notre Dame, who could lose Stanford, USC, Wisconsin, and Arkansas off their schedule, the conference has said they're going to, quote, help Notre Dame out, unquote. Notre Dame could end up playing as many conference games as, all the members of the ACC. Of course, Mark, think about that. The ACC already has a schedule. Everybody plays, 8 games? I think the ACC and SEC play 8.
Right.
So you're going to ask some schools to play Notre Dame. Doesn't that mean they'll play 9 conference games? So or are you going to then take a current conference game off their schedule, which means you're doing it for somebody else also? Just saying you're going to help them out is still complicated.
Very, David. Very. Are you going to 9 games then? And are you going to give them 4 and everybody gets 9? Once you're at 9, right, you have the dilemma we've already talked about. Some teams are going to get 5 home games.
Right. Now, we don't know how many fans are going to be at games this year, but
doesn't matter.
Right. Never mind the impact that all this is going to have on the Group of 5 and the FCS. One other college football note from yesterday. Did you see Florida and North Carolina State announced a football home and home?
Funny you say that. I've literally got the story right here in front of me in case you didn't see it, because that was of all the chaos going on. This was something that had a little bit down the road, but Florida's going to go to Raleigh in 2026 and then in 2032, making it the 6-year home and home break.
Right. Listen, don't get me wrong. I'm glad they're playing one another. It's the SEC against ACC, and, it's great. But I do love the fact when they announced the home and home this many years out and separated by this many years. One other college sports note, the court filing, the Zion's former agency,
yeah,
and this got lost in the shuffle yesterday, but apparently Zion's stepfather got $400,000 in gifts
while he was at Duke.
Right. Remember, he was at Duke a year.
Okay,
so I don't know how much Zion got paid for the year, but let me tell you,
everybody else did.
His stepfather, that's a hell of a year at Duke. Right there. Xfinity race last night. Ross Chastain finished 3rd, yet dropped from 3rd to 4th in the point standings. He's still within 50 points of the overall series lead. We've got NASCAR at Kentucky Speedway tonight, and we'll have it for you right here on Southwest Florida's Fox Sports Radio. Golf yesterday, the first of back-to-back weeks in Muirfield, Jack's Place. It's the Workday Charity Open. Colin Morikawa, the American, fired a 7-under round.
He's not very good.
No, he's not precise with his irons at all. He won better than Adam Hadwin, the Canadian. 2 better over 4 guys, including Zach Johnson, who we had just talked about yesterday with some length. And he has a 3-shot lead over 11 players, including Justin Thomas and Patrick Reeds. Other notables, Phil at 1 over, Brooks Koepka at 2 over, Bubba Watson with a 7 over 79. This may have also been lost yesterday. And, Mark, we could talk about this. In fact, we may have to do a segment on this later in the show, although we have such a busy show today. The FHSAA yesterday, they have a task force as to what to do about fall sports. The task force proposed, now it hasn't been approved, but it's been proposed. There are 5 sports that take place in the state of Florida in the fall. They are football, golf, bowling, cross country, and volleyball. Now, not every school participates in all 5 sports, but those are the 5. And what the task force has proposed is that you stagger the start dates, and each school or school district gets to pick what sports are going to start when. Because what I think they're wanting to do is not have everybody have to show up for practice at once.
Can you give me those sports again, please?
Football, golf, bowling, cross country, and volleyball.
Okay. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, because none of those sports practice anywhere near one another at any time. Does the golf and the football team share any space? What about the volleyball team and the football team? What about the bowling team and any of them?
I'm with you.
And cross country. They right. Couldn't be any more opposite of sports. That's stupid. That's a waste of a meeting.
because now if it was track and field, the track and the football team share the same space. That would make sense. But cross country, you always run off campus.
Right.
Right. You don't.
I
Just
watched the
run laps
Estero
around
runners for years. They've been running around 41
Yeah.
to Corkscrew to. I
Yes.
mean, come on. We all know their route. We've seen them
Exactly.
for 10 years down here.
Right. They don't just do 12 laps around the quarter mile.
No. They go run.
Exactly. But that's the proposal. And because right now, at the end of this month, July 27th, is when everybody, all fall sports, show up to start practicing. And what they're proposing is the school districts decide which sports are going to start when. And so so then one would start on July 27th practicing, the other one 2 weeks later, the other one 2 weeks after that, and the other 2 weeks after that. And also, Mark, that would mean games or matches or meets or whatever they'd be would then also be staggered and be on 2 weeks. But as of right now, everybody's showing up to start practicing on Monday, July 27th, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, depending on your school district, everyone's showing up to go to school. So it's just what the FHSAA threw out there yesterday.
Smart people in that group.
Listen, I don't want to say that the NFL was funny yesterday. There were 2 stories in the NFL yesterday in which you have to find the irony dripping. National Football League. They still want to play games against one another. Think about what takes place during a game. Yet because of the fear of the coronavirus, the NFL yesterday banned jersey exchanges after the games. So the 2 offensive linemen can pound on one another for 65 plays a game, but after the game, they can't give one another a bro hug and say, hey, and take off their jerseys in exchange.
David, it's not just the jerseys. They have to stay 6 feet away from one another following the games.
Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I mean, the irony is biting.
But the irony of that story pales in comparison to the irony of this story. For those that don't know, Jeffrey Lurie owns the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles have an anti-Semitic wide receiver who made some comments earlier in the week. In case you missed them, look them up. Jeffrey Lurie is Jewish. Jeffrey Lurie has a production company. Yesterday, they finished, and I kid you not, their first documentary on Adolf Hitler. Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm.
God, I thought it was going to be Deshaun Jackson. That was bad enough, David.
No. So there you have it. You want irony? Think the Philadelphia Eagles. Major League Baseball announced that next year they're going to do opening day the right way, finally. April 1st, Mark, all 30 teams are going to play. No one's going to have opening day off. You're going to have 15 games. They're all going to be the same day everybody's playing. No special Sunday one-off, this, that, and the other thing. Everybody's playing. NBA news, teams yesterday and the day before headed to Orlando. The Raptors on Wednesday left Naples and bussed to Orlando. Yesterday, the Houston Rockets team flight landed in Orlando. Mike D'Antoni was on it, the 69-year-old head coach. There was some thought that he, for fears of the coronavirus and his age, that he wouldn't coach. He's like, no, I'm coaching. Doctors have said it's okay. All right. You know who wasn't on the flight? Russell Westbrook and James Harden. No reason given, but interesting. And finally, NHL news, Lindsey Ruff, former head coach of the Sabres, who's been an assistant for the last few years with the New York Rangers. He's now the new head coach of the New Jersey Devils, which is always interesting because, we all understand it. You could be a rival. Like if you're an assistant at Michigan and the Ohio State job opens up and they're interested in interviewing you, you got to go interview for the job. It's a really good job. But if you get it, for a while, it is a little awkward. You're turning around looking at your buddies and what have you, and it's like, wait a minute. We're going against one another now? So, because the Rangers and Devils, not particularly fond of one another.
Yeah, but it's not the Islanders.
Well, it's actually, though, more current. it's true. The Rangers and Islanders, that hatred is deep.
Well, the Rangers hate the Islanders because the Islanders beat them.
Yes.
The Devils hate the Rangers because the Rangers beat them. I don't think that your hatred to the Devils is anywhere near your hatred towards the Islanders because they kicked your butt for a decade.
And they kicked everybody's, but yes.
Yeah, but you were good.
Well, yeah, we were good, but not great. And they were great. Yes, no doubt about it. And, yeah, well, in the Devils, it's the whole little brother thing, Jersey. You know, the Rangers get all the attention, and yet we're the one playing for and winning Stanley Cups. So there you have it, 14 minutes before 7. That mark is
the starting 5. 5 big stories that you need to know. This is Miller and Moulton starting 5. Fox Sports Radio and FoxSportsFM.com.
You did miss one, David.
I did.
Yes, under 2 minutes left in the first half. Collingwood all over Hawthorn, 40-13.
Is this Australian rules football?
Yeah, it is.
Unbelievable.
It's on FS1 too.
You love it so much.
So happy.
It is such a guilty pleasure of yours.
It's better than the British Open.
You're not betting it, are you?
No, because I didn't get up early enough, or I would
have. Miller and Moulton. We got to come up with a poll question. My guess is it'll have something to do with the chaos that is now ensuing in college football. Bud Elliott, speaking of college football, he'll join us near 7:30. And Jared Bednar, the head coach of the Colorado Avalanche. How about that? An NBA head coach last week and an NHL head coach this week.
We're team. Go Avs.
I mean, Mark, we're a brand. You can't say that. You're a Wings fan.
Doesn't matter. They're not in the playoffs, and I know the head coach of the Avs. I want this guy to win the Stanley Cup so badly. He is such a good dude. Nothing would make me happier than for Colorado to win the Stanley Cup.
Come on.
David, they're not in the same conference. The Wings aren't in the playoffs. I don't know the head coach of the Detroit Red Wings. I've known Jared Bednar for 15, 20 years. I mean, I've played golf with the guy. He's played golf with my father. He's a super good guy. I'm rooting for him.
I will say, now that they're not in the same conference anymore, I think I can cut you some slack because the rivalry is not what it was for sure. But my goodness, I mean, there was a time when it was arguably the nastiest rivalry in all of sports. I mean, it had a 5-year run where it was the rivalry in sports.
And think about that. I mean, ESPN would very early on in SportsCenter be talking about the Avs-Wings game that night. And they didn't cover hockey at this time.
Right. If Jordan did and the Bulls didn't do something, they would lead with the Wings and the Lance. That's how big a deal it was. Miller and Moulton. Thanks so much for being with us, Southwest Florida's Fox Sports Radio.
Welcome to the program.
Just a drubbing. I mean, Collingwood up 41-13 at the half. And these guys all look like they're dead already. This is the greatest sport on the planet. These are the toughest MFers that walk Earth.
But here we are with a regular season that will have as much excitement and strategy as we have seen in recent memory.
The Dan Patrick Show.
There she is. Look at this. The opening hug of the morning. Oh, she doesn't even want to do it. Oh, my goodness. How are you? Did you get good sleeps? Yeah.
I just woke up.
You did? You going to go snuggle your mom?
She's up.
Oh, you going to go lay in her bed? Oh, okay.
You also have other
all right.
products as well.
Now, are they going to freak out if this is underneath, David? Because we still got to be able to know when we come back on the air.
Well, there's nothing we can do. I mean, we have to keep it on faint.
Right. That's kind of the way I looked at it.
Hear our show. So. But I do love the excitement in the Twitch chat room that we talk so much football. They feel it's a football Friday.
All right. Speaking of which, what do you just want to go with the elimination, with the possible elimination of non-conference games? Does this make the 2020 season, more exciting, or does your level of interest go up, stay the same, or this ruins college football for me? Should the ACC tell Notre Dame to pound sand for being an independent?
Well, that's a fascinating question. My guess is, though, that there's
so much Notre Dame hatred.
Right, that you'll get 70+% that'll say, tell them to go pound sand.
I mean, because I know we got like one UCF fan in the chat room. He'd be like, really? You're going to help out the ACC and not, I mean, and I don't get to play my games, so I...
Google ERM Roofing or call 239-332-1441.
License number CCC 1326954. For professional roofing, the name you need to know is DR Martineau.
Listen to Miller and Moulton at home on your Amazon Alexa. Just say,
How about this? With the cancellation, if all non-conference games get canceled, should Notre Dame have to join a conference for 2020?
Call the doctor, the pool doctor.
Hi, Dr. Mark here. Is your pool a pain to operate? Automation is the answer. Use your phone to turn on your spa, and it'll be warm when you get home. Free on-site evaluations. We're a family company, and for over 40 years, we've been doing business right.
Of course, it's you'd have to redo your conference schedules.
There's a lot to that. That's really hard, believe it or not. I mean,
if you were the ACC, would you help Notre Dame out? Yes, it's in our best interest.
Do you panic when someone says we need to talk? Well, here it goes. We need to talk, but don't panic. This is a good kind of talk.
No.
Those glasses and contacts you're sporting, they're just in the way of you having...
Because, I mean, they are in the conference for every other sport, right?
Yes.
$1,000 off bilateral LASIK, the savings that will allow you to celebrate better vision and a better life. Dr. Jonathan France and his expert team of surgeons want to help you see your future in 2020 through the advanced technology of laser vision correction. So what if you've been told you're not a candidate for LASIK? France Eye Care wants you to know there are other options available. But to learn more, you need to call now. Schedule your free screening. Take advantage of that $1,000.
This is, what's also interesting about this is, let's just say we end up with conference games only, Mark. You're in a conference that plays 9 conference games, and here's the SEC and the ACC that only play 8. Is this the year it comes back to hurt those conferences?
All right, now we're getting somewhere.
Let's discuss.
Miller and Moulton. You're live.
Seven minutes before 7 o'clock. Miller and Moulton, Southwest Florida's Fox Sports Radio, streaming at millerandmoulton.com, broadcasting live on the Miller and Moulton YouTube and twitch.tv channels. You can chime into the show via the Williamson Brothers Marine and Roofing text and talk line at 479-5551. That's 479-5551. This is usually about the point in the show in which we come up with a poll question. But...
Well, we have one. Are you comfortable with this poll question? I mean, it was basically yours. If you were the ACC, would you help out Notre Dame football? Would you help Notre Dame football out in 2020? Yes or no?
And I would, even though my first instinct would be to try to get a little something out of them. The first thing I would do is, honestly, my gut reaction would be, is there a way for 1 year and 1 year only that we make you a member of the conference? We'll redo some schedules right now. We'll figure it out. And you know what? Let's do this for 1 year. It's a coronavirus year. What the blank?
No, I know. And I know what I'd want to do. I'd want to say, for the first time ever, Notre Dame, you need us a hell of a lot more than we need you. I don't know if I want to just be nice to you for 1 year. We can either watch you guys sit the football season out, or you can join the ACC. Period.
But they are a member of the ACC in every other sport.
I know.
And
I've got them over the barrel for football right now.
I understand, but, Mark, you're an Irish Catholic. I'm an Irish Catholic. Okay? We hold grudges. You don't think that Notre Dame would remember this? They would get out of their ACC agreement as soon as they could if the ACC decided to play hardball with them in their time of need. They would. Absolutely, they would.
And I understand. I wouldn't go at them that way, though. I'd say, look, I want you guys in permanently, but here's what I'm going to do. Keep your NBC money. Keep it. I'll even cut you in on the ACC network money because you just added a ton to my brand. Because I can put you on there for football games when you're playing my schools.
But you do know when you sit down and you start these negotiations and you go, come on now, why don't we use this as the opportunity to join the conference? And they go, we're not interested in that. This is a one-year thing. And then if you try to leverage them at all, they're going to go, really? This is how you want to play this?
I understand that, but David, from a travel and economic standpoint, Notre Dame does not benefit them in any other sport. Maybe basketball a little bit, but not much. Women's basketball more than men's, possibly. I mean, what the hell? What does it do for the ACC to have Notre Dame play non-revenue sports in their conference?
Yeah, I don't know.
They play hockey in the Big Ten, for crying out loud.
Right. I know. Now, of course, the ACC doesn't play hockey.
I got you. But the ridiculousness of what the conferences do is
right
on display right now. And you're right.
Oh, trust me, it's my initial instinct, though, is to go, ooh, can we leverage this? Can we get them? Can we use this to our advantage? But big picture,
probably not.
Probably.
But, man, it would be fun.
Yep. You turn around and you go, man, it sucks being an adult. All right.
Miller and Moulton, Fox Sports Radio. It really does.
Sometimes just being a vindictive 17-year-old is not bad.
Don't ask me why, but the Australian accent, when I look up, I don't even have to hear them talk at halftime of these games. It just sounds so bar talk. Their happiness and their attitude and their accent, it's just really difficult to take the halftime shows seriously. I watched one once, and I just laughed through the whole thing.
Open every day, including Sunday. Call 239-481-2600. GallianaCars.com. 42 month leases, 10,000 miles per year, $32.94 due at signing plus tax, time, title, zero security deposit, $13.88 per month per thousand borrowed for 72 months with 0% APR with zero down, lender approval, offers don't combine.
Oh, enough out of it. Holy crap. I don't know who this Jeff Reynolds is here. Let me see who this guy is. All right, doesn't even matter. But Dennis Dodd retweeted it. The superintendent of schools in Dallas told MSNBC high school football in the state of Texas is highly unlikely in 2020.
Well, yesterday, there was a story that said high school football in Texas is in doubt.
This is the superintendent of Dallas schools told MSNBC that. I mean, that's a pretty high-ranking person.
Yeah, and obviously second biggest city in the state.
I mean,
now, once again, 2020, does that mean that they will play it in March and April? Right.
I don't know the answer to that.
But that is.
I mean, New Mexico did it, but that doesn't matter.
Right.
Michigan's talked about it. I think that matters. It's not what it once was, but it's a decent-sized state. Crazy. That's just crazy.
There's only one way to wake up in the morning.
How the heck are you?
Yep, that's it. Miller.
You know what? I'll try to bring you back some fish.
And Moulton.
Okay, you drop it off at the front door.
Probably in the mailbox. We'll pack ice.
Broadcasting live from the Kobe Cooling Remote Studios, where it's always cool and comfortable.
Yes! Oh, I like it. It's up to you now. It's up to you. I like it.
Now, the best local sports show this town has ever heard. Here's Miller and Moulton.
You're live. At nearly 2 minutes past the top of the hour, thanks so much for being with us and making us part of your day. We're Miller and Moulton on Southwest Florida's Fox Sports Radio, streaming at millerandmoulton.com, broadcasting live at Miller and Moulton's YouTube and Twitch.tv channels. They're free. Sign up for them. And then just type in Miller and Moulton.
Yeah.
It's that easy.
It's pretty easy. It is pretty easy.
Hot steaming deal. Right there. 479-5551 is how you can chime in via the Williamson Brothers Marine and Roofing text and talk line. 479-5551. Talking so much football in the first hour, Mark, that people have texted in and chimed in on the Twitch TV chat room saying it feels like our first Football Friday of the season.
Football Friday! That's midseason form right there.
At least. I think
that was a downfield block, David.
Right. Trading deadline's come and gone, and you're geared up and ready to make your postseason push with that one. But, of course, I don't know how much of this news is good, but, yes, we've had a lot of it. And, heck, in Texas, Mark, they're talking out loud, wondering about whether or not they're going to play high school football this year.
Texas.
You're right.
I mean, the superintendent of Dallas schools was on MSNBC yesterday and said it would be highly unlikely that they will play football in 2020 in Texas. There are 8 stadiums in Texas that put more people in them than all of the MAC schools do for football.
At least. Friday Night Lights, I think, outdraws the MAC.
A UCF fan hit us up on the text line and says, really, we're going to lose the entire North Carolina and Georgia Tech series due to hurricanes and a pandemic?
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Boy, it really is working out that way, isn't it?
Wow.
Man, oh, man. How many schools do you think are going to help out, quote-unquote, UCF, unquote, the way they're going to help out Notre Dame?
Well, that's just the thing. For Boise and UCF, and I don't know if I'm missing somebody in the schools, the 5, the other.
Right, in Conference USA or Sun Belt.
You know, I don't know where Memphis is right now, but UCF and Boise have been certainly the staples of the past few years.
Right. For the group of 5.
Well, what they need in the group of 5 is to play teams in the Power 5 to get their shot at a New Year's Six Bowl.
Right.
Wow, it's a lot of numbers. And now Boise doesn't get Florida State. UCF doesn't get Tech and UNC. And UNC has turned it around here pretty quickly.
Right.
Mac Brown's doing a hell of a job there.
Right. That win would look a lot better on paper now than when Mac took the job, quite frankly, a little over a year and a half ago.
So, yes, this is a kick in the teeth for UCF.
Now, it's not official yet, but the thought is it's going to be. The Big Ten made it official yesterday, which caught a lot of people by surprise. Supposedly, Tim Brando, for those that follow him on Twitter, and we love Tim because he comes on our show and he's a great guest. You can ask him one question and go literally get in your car, go get a Starbucks, come back, and he's still talking. So he's awesome for Sports Talk Radio. All right, but Tim's been on a thing for a while that college sports and college football needs a commissioner. Well, you and I are of the belief, whether you think it does or not, it's not going to happen. These conference commissioners are not going to give their power up to somebody else. I mean, they barely work with other conference commissioners. You think they're going to give their power in which somebody actually tells them what to do? No, it's not going to happen.
But it would, in theory, have prevented what we had happen yesterday, Mark, where one of the Power Five announced unilaterally, this is what we're going to do. It does put the other conferences in a bit of a bind.
Huge bind. Huge bind. It's either, if you're the SEC, which, nationally we know it's the best conference, but the comments about right now, hey, they're going to play football no matter what down there. So now you pinned the SEC in a corner saying, oh, you guys are going to just keep playing football against everybody. And yet, as David said at the beginning of the show, Iowa and Iowa State can't play.
Right.
Notre Dame and Wisconsin can't play. I mean, these are bus trips.
Right. Florida State can't play.
Well, Georgia we're not even there yet, though. I mean, just right. In Big Ten country.
Right.
Just in Big Ten. Iowa State. Really? Can't do that game. Okay. Because we haven't gotten there in the SEC. Maybe the SEC and the ACC do a +1 just for the reason you're talking about, David. Conference games +1.
They look at what the Big Ten has done and go, we see where you're coming from, but that causes just a little too much chaos for us.
Not just chaos. You said, why are the Big Ten did this, but did they give us a real reason of why they're doing it?
Well, I think the reason is assumed. It's assumed that we think that COVID is going to interrupt this season. We're also worried. See, to me, it's also their way of saying we're pushing back the start of the season. I think it's a way also for the Big Ten schools right now to maybe send their kids home, get them off campus. Ohio State shut down all activities earlier this week because of the number of COVID positives. I wonder if this is a way for the Big Ten schools to go, you know what, get out of here.
But they've also let it out that it's to try to save travel and try to not to get on airplanes, and they want to bus and do all these things. That's been another point that that's been out there, David. And I bring that up because is there anything safer than Iowa State from a standpoint of travel?
Well, and I think we can argue that you're safer on campus than you are sending the kids back home to then go. And,
totally.
I think you're better off trying to control it. You have a chance of creating some semblance of a bubble at a university as opposed to sending everybody home. But I think we're assuming this is why they did it. They think the season's going to be interrupted by the coronavirus. They're worried that they can't get it started on time, so they're going to give themselves a couple of extra weeks. Instead of having to be ready to play at the end of August or Labor Day weekend, how about if we basically say, all right, by September 19th, we need to be ready to play. We'll give ourselves a couple of extra weeks to try to get these numbers in check. We're buying ourselves some time here. That's what I think they did. But they did catch the other conferences off guard. These conferences had been talking to one another every day.
And that's what we got yesterday. That's the part that really floored me, David. I know that there's no commissioner, but we did find out yesterday that these conferences are talking every single day.
And if you're Greg Sankey, quite frankly, if you're John Swafford, aren't you a little annoyed at the Big Ten? It's like, hold on a second. We've been talking. We had agreed we weren't going to announce anything like this for 2 to 3 more weeks. We were just going to keep talking. We were going to see what's going on. All right. 2 to 3 weeks is a long time in this thing. As we have mentioned all week, if we go back 1 month ago, think about what the prevailing wisdom, and I'll put that in air quotes, wisdom was in this country, and how much different it is a month later, and how much different it has been, quite frankly, every 9th or 10th day of the month. You look at what our prevailing wisdom was on April 10th, May 10th, June 10th, and now July 10th. And if on these other conferences, I'm like, wait, why did you do this? We were just talking yesterday. There's no need to do this now. Plus, only conference games, huh? Well, then do we look bad if we decide we want to go conference games plus one? Plus, let's go really big picture here. The SEC and the ACC only play 8 conference games. So if the Pac-12, and the Big 12, they play everybody. I mean, now they only have 10 teams.
Well, yeah, they play 9.
But they play 9. The Pac-12 plays 9. The Big 10 plays 9. Well, in the past, it didn't matter that the SEC and the ACC only played 8. The SEC was viewed as the best conference. The elite team, whether it's Florida State or Clemson, and the ACC is always viewed as being at the level of the other conferences' elite teams. And so, but now, Mark, if we get a case where we're only playing conference games, and at the end of the year, we've got 9-0s versus 8-0s, or 8-1s versus 7-1s. And when it comes to the playoff, you going to put the 7-1 ahead over an 8-1? I mean, seriously, this is never
depends. Is it Alabama?
Before. Well, it's never been part of the equation before. We've said, when will it? When will it hurt the SEC and the ACC that they play one less conference game? In fact, you can argue that in the last generation of college football, it has worked for them. Because oftentimes, like Ohio State a couple years ago, playing the extra conference game could have been that late season loss to Purdue, or and you go, boy, these two conferences over here, they don't have that extra conference game to get worn down and lose in November. Well, what if the irony this year, if you're Swofford and Sankey, is we actually would be left out? We'd be left out because I'm telling you, it's possible Texas A&M could go 7-1 in conference this year. It really is. And what if they win the right game, and therefore they're the team that technically wins the West? They're not Alabama. They're not LSU. They're Texas A&M. I mean, would you put them at 7-1 ahead of Penn State at 8-1?
Well, and let me just throw this one out loud for you, David, because as you mentioned, the two teams that play 8, maybe they were talking about conference games plus 1, because that keeps Florida, Florida State, Georgia, Georgia Tech, South Carolina, and Clemson. But Alabama plays USC and a bunch of junk. Well, the USC game's not going to happen. I think we can all conclude by what happened yesterday that Alabama USC is not happening. I think that's pretty safe. A&M doesn't play anybody. So what do you do with the rest of the schools that don't have all these rivalries? What's their one game?
Right.
Because every schedule's so vastly different.
And so if you're running these other conferences, one in the ACC and SEC, you play 8, the others play 9. Right now, they're still hell-bent on having a playoff. In fact, John, Hancock there came out yesterday and said, hey, everything's the same. We're going to do the process the way we do it. Two-thirds of the way through the season, we're going to come out that Tuesday with our first poll, and we're just going to do it the way we normally do. Now, I believe we're not going to have bowl games this year outside of the playoff games. I think we're going to have 6 bowls. The 3 that involve the playoff, and then, is the Rose Bowl in it this year?
I believe it is. I think they're back in the rotation this year.
I think there's going to be 6 bowl games this year. I'll bet right now, Mark, we don't do the Sun Bowl. I can't see a 2 4-4 teams, or a 5-4 team and a 4-4 team, because it's Pac-12 ACC. I can't see 5-4 Arizona State and 4-4 Wake Forest agreeing to travel to El Paso to play in the Sun Bowl. I don't. I think they'll call it a day.
Yeah, Sugar and Rose are your semis this year, for what it's worth.
And Orange is the title game, right?
Well, no, the title game's the title game. The Orange Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl are what they are.
Gotcha.
But and the Peach, rather.
Title game in Miami?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So think about that with Super Bowl and title game back-to-back. And if, knock on wood, we have a season that concludes, we've got the national championship game in Miami and the Super Bowl in Tampa. And also NHL All-Star game next year, I believe, in Fort Lauderdale.
Yippee.
It's something to go to. 479-5551, 479-5551. If on the other conferences, I'm trying to salvage a game. I'm trying to go conference games +1.
As this texter says, and we brought this up in the first hour, David, he says, no football paydays for the non-conference schools will kill their sports programs.
Yes.
Oh,
absolutely.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You're on to something. And this is why, to David and I, yesterday's Big Ten decision was unusual in that the Big Ten, I mean, to me, could have just ended MAC football yesterday. I'm not joking around.
No.
They all play MAC schools.
Yes. For the obvious reason.
I mean, Kent State, I just went through about 6 schedules quickly because I wanted to see who I know who Ohio State had. I knew who Michigan had. I was just trying to see some of these non-conference games.
Right.
And Penn State and Alabama both play Kent State this year.
Right.
You don't think that that's paying for every bit of their athletic department budget this year?
That's $2.5 million, I'll bet you. I'll bet you that you add it up. I'll bet you those 2 games, at least a minimum a game. And one of them, I think, is over $1 million. $2.25 million, I'll bet you they're getting for those 2 games. Gone. $2.25 million. At Kent State, that's a ton of money. Ton of money. Yeah. I mean, that's a chance to pay the football bills there. Yep.
Yes.
And remember, these schools also, their checks got a lot smaller. We didn't have an NCAA March Madness last year. Okay. Those are the schools and the FGCUs of the world that are dependent on that check. That check got cut by 2/3 because what's the big NCAA fundraiser, if you will? I mean, that's what the March Madness is. It might as well be the NCAA's Jerry Lewis Telethon. I mean, that's what it is. And they didn't have it. Those checks got cut drastically.
So all these MAC schools, now they're not going to get their guarantee games from the Big Ten and the SEC in their ass kicking that they take in September for a paycheck. Oh, yeah, by the way, every single school on the planet is going to lose attendance this year. No matter how you slice this, not every incoming freshman that was going to come is coming. Some are going to live at home or go online. But not go at all means what at these schools? No student fees to the athletic department. I was talking with a professor at Rutgers a couple of weeks ago, and what they were hearing 2 weeks ago about lack of attendance had them scared blankless.
Never mind lack of attendance at games and all the revenue that comes with that. I mean, this is the problem when you are in an arms race and the funding goes away. And that's essentially what the coronavirus has done. When you're in an arms race, quite frankly, for those old enough to remember, this is what happened in the 80s. We were in an arms race with the Soviet Union. They ran out of money. Oh, I mean, I could argue for our ideals and everything and Reagan and what have you. Listen, we were right, and we were on the right side of history and all that. But the reason it ended at the timing that it ended was Gorbachev was the first Russian leader who could look across at us and go, well, you're right, we're broke. So we might as well put a halt to this because we don't have bread in the stores, never mind missiles. So you want to sign something? We could sign something. I'm willing to sign something. And let's talk college sports right now. If the money goes away, how do you continue the arms race? Tell me. Now, we know certain places, they can recoup their money quickly.
And
certain
the Big
places,
Ten and the SEC, because of their network deals, are going to be okay.
Correct.
But the ACC, with this new television deal that they were counting on a bunch of money coming in, it's not going to come in the way they thought it was. The Big 12 struggles financially, and the Pac-12 is canyons behind the big boys in what they are generating financially.
And they're about to overthrow their leader. All right, you wait. I don't know if Larry Scott makes it to opening day of football season. All right, so that's what's going on out in the Pac-12. and they don't have a new TV deal that they can announce for another 3 years.
And we got one good text here about a minute ago, David. And at first I kind of poo-pooed the text, but as we're talking, he may be right. Won't this be the moment that pushes us to an 18 playoff? Very well could be, because what are the colleges going to need? More money.
Yeah, but with all due respect, you know who has to pony up the
networks?
Money?
I know.
ESPN. No, not the networks.
The network. Right. And their cash is, I don't know if it's dwindling. Well, David, is it? They've made all kinds of cuts. No one's cutting their cable. I mean,
yes, every day they're cutting their cable. I mean, but ESPN's, Disney's cash flow, ESPN's cash flow, their ratings this year. Oh no, listen. This is just speculation on my part. We have not heard officially that the ESPN and the SEC have signed that TV contract, have they?
No.
I mean, now I think the reason we haven't heard it officially is because ESPN's trying to figure out their contracts with the other conferences and how they're going to keep everything. Okay, while giving the SEC everything. You know, how they're not going to lose the ACC, quite frankly. That's what or the Big Ten. That's
the Big Ten, because they've got part of the ACC network, but I know where you're at.
But believe me, ESPN's in no hurry to buy out CBS to start being in control of the SEC games. Now you want them to pony up a few extra $100 million a year to expand the playoff? Yeah, I don't think so. No, and I can guarantee it, in fact, because ESPN's not going to do anything before they get this NFL deal. They want to get Thursday Night Football. They want to put Monday Night Football on ABC. They want to get in the Super Bowl rotation. They're going to have to pay $3 billion a year, is the thought inside the industry. They're going to have to go from $1.9 billion to $3 billion a year to get what it is they want. It's $1 billion extra dollars. That's more than the college football playoff and their SEC deal combined that they'll have to pay extra to the NFL. College football may be number 2, but it's a distant number 2.
Speaking of which, rumors on Monday Night Football that they're trying to get Herbie to take on Monday Night Football as well. I hope not.
I think they're just trying to, quite frankly, it's a coronavirus year. There are certain prominent people in the industry who have one more year left on their contract.
They're just trying to bridge the year?
Yeah.
But you can't bridge Herbie a year and then take him off of Monday Night Football. That's bad for Herbie's brand, I think.
Really?
Yes.
I think it's great exposure. It goes from a game in which game day has about 4 million people. The Saturday night ABC game has about 4 million people watch it. Monday Night Football's got 3 times that.
I got you, but when you do it for a year and then they take you off of it, I don't think that's good for your brand.
Okay, fair enough. Miller and Moulton. Bud Elliott.
We like his brand.
Oh, he's got a hell of a brand, 24/7 Sports, and we'll throw all this college football stuff at him coming up next. Miller and Moulton. Thanks for listening. Southwest Florida's Fox Sports Radio.
This is The Herd with Colin Cowherd.
We're giving athletes $130, $140, $150 million contracts. Joel Embiid was defined by injury. There are so few transformative athletes. When you get them, you just pay. You worry about the injuries later. Here's the reality about Cam. He's not as talented as everybody thinks.
Colin Cowherd. Weekdays at noon on Southwest Florida's Fox Sports Radio and FoxSportsFM.com.
Dial star 2020. Friends, I care.
Cataract surgery has become so advanced that patients can literally design their vision to meet their individual lifestyle needs. Imagine life without cataracts and being able to see clearly without glasses or contacts. Dr. Jonathan France and his team of highly skilled specialists at France Eye Care bring
good.
you state-of-
CNN last night, or the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has issued a La Nina watch, which means more chances of fall hurricanes in the Atlantic.
Oh, good, and especially since the Gulf temperature is already 90 degrees in July. So God knows if we get anything that ever makes it to the Gulf, it's not like that thing's not going to churn like a locomotive.
Wow. Whoa. Nick Walenda's doing a show in Fort Myers?
It started last night, I think.
I think through the weekend.
In the parking lot?
Isn't it like a 3-4 day thing?
I don't know. Drive-in thrill show. It sure is. Human Cannonball, Dave the Bullet Smith. Casio, how do I not have Dave the Bullet Smith on this show? Are you kidding me?
Is this like Super Dave?
Kinda. Same principle. I'm watching some guy shoot. He's, spread eagle on a. What the hell? No Dave the Bullet Smith?
I can't believe it. We're talking to Jared Bednar.
Yeah, but I could have had Dave the Bullet.
That's what I mean. Don't get me wrong. I mean, NHL head coach, whatever.
Bedsy and all.
I mean, it's Jared Bednar, right?
Yes. The 1 year with Huntington, David, they were one of the worst teams in ECHL history.
Okay.
Bedsy played a lot. So he was a good defenseman at this level. AHL good, but played here for a lot of years.
Right.
But he's in Huntington, and they suck. And he was, I think, minus 47 that year.
Oh, wow.
And Derek Eberle, I'm with Nashville, and I mean Eberle, you just give it to him up and down. You're minus 47.
You might as well call Bud.
Oh, might as well jump. Good morning, Bud.
How you doing?
Oh, good. Anything going on in college football?
No. It looks like nothing. So.
Okay. All right. Good talk.
Talk to you next
stay
month.
Safe. Be well.
Wow. What a cluster blank.
Seriously. You think it's important to these guys that they get these games in the fall?
We were just talking. What happens to the arms race if the money for the arms goes away? And that's the problem.
Bud, what happens to MAC football? Like Kent State plays Penn State and Alabama. That's $2.5–3 million that goes away.
I was talking to an administrator friend of mine yesterday, and he was like, one little dirty little secret of this game is that some of these MAC schools are really bringing in, like, squarely in the middle of FCS level revenue, and yet they're staying in the MAC basically on hope, but they're not really spending at a level that would allow you to compete in the MAC.
Here we go.
This is Miller and Moulton.
You're live. Nearly halfway home on this Friday, and it is very much a football Friday with the events of late yesterday afternoon and into the evening. Miller and Moulton, thanks for being with us. Southwest Florida's Fox Sports Radio. Bud Elliott's kind enough to join us once again. He of 24/7 Sports and co-host of Nolecast. You can follow Bud on Twitter at Bud Elliott 3. Bud Elliott 3. Bud, top of the morning to you. Hope you and the family are safe and well in the greater Orlando area. How are you?
I'm doing well, guys, and it feels good to say Football Friday. We have some hope that football will be back this fall now.
Boy, I mean, not as much as this has been a bad month, Bud. If you think about it, we've talked about this often. A month ago, if you would have just taken that capsule in time, people thought things were going right. We were moving forward. We were going to play football, and now here we are in July. The state of New Mexico has already canceled high school football. Texas is talking about it, and the Big Ten announced yesterday that they're not going to play non-conference games. Bud, do you expect the ACC, SEC, Pac-12, Big 12, how many more announcements do you expect like this, and how soon do you think they will happen?
So I would expect, just based on the reports by McMurphy and Feldman and Fisher and those guys, that we'll probably see the ACC and the Pac-12 in relatively short order. I don't have a great feel for what the Big 12 is going to do. And with the SEC, they might want to hold out, but here's the thing. If the other four big conferences go conference only, the SEC, you don't really have a choice. You're going conference only as well because all your major non-conference games would be gone at that point. I think the announcement from the Big Ten, and you got to remember, the Big Ten footprint is largely an area that kind of has COVID more under control than a lot of these other conference footprints do. I think it really underscores the real want of these leagues to play football in the fall. Like, they really see a spring football season as like last resort disaster option, right? And so they're looking at it and saying, okay, what's the way we could maybe pull this off? And I do think that their plan makes some sense in two real reasons. Number one, if you play conference only, it allows you to have like complete control over the testing and the standards, right? So you as a league know exactly who's being tested in your league, how often, et cetera, what the results are. And it also, ultimately here, I think the goal is to try to get in like 6 or 8 games. You're going to play your divisional games first, and then your cross-divisional games if you have time for that, right? And then maybe a couple other conference games at the very end of that if all goes great. But like, they're trying to get this done to where they can play a conference championship game so that they can get that money. And if everybody gets through, maybe we can have a playoff still. I think that's really the goal, is to try and get this thing done in fall.
But are you surprised, because we are, that the Big Ten didn't say conference games +1? And if I were running some of these other conferences, would do conference games +1, because there are some terrific rivalries. I mean, if the SEC, ACC, we all know what the games are. By the Big Ten doing what they did yesterday, you're not going to get Iowa State this year. Notre Dame was scheduled to play Wisconsin. Ohio State was scheduled to play Oregon. Now, maybe some of those games would not have been the +1. But do you think that there's a chance? Also, the ACC and SEC only play 8 conference games. The other 3 play 9. Do you think there's a chance that one of these conferences says we'll go conference games +1?
I do think there's a chance. I also think that they, just putting my lawyer hat on here for a second, if you're going to try to exercise a force majeure clause in those contracts and say, hey, pandemic prevented us from playing this game against Georgia Southern, Georgia Southern's lawyers are going to say, well, you're able to travel like 3,000 miles away to play this team who's in your league, and then you also deemed it safe to play this team who's outside your league. So it doesn't appear to be a distance issue, right? Like the distance wasn't the reason why it was unsafe to play during the pandemic, and it obviously didn't really appear to be a conference issue since you're able to play outside your conference. But yet you're going to cancel our game and try to not pay us our $1.3 million. Let's go ahead and take this to court. I wonder if there's a legal aspect here, because almost every big school now has these contracts for these games they're going to be canceling. Like, a lot of them don't have spaces to reschedule them in the few coming years we have. So I wonder if that's kind of a complicating factor. I would agree with you. I think there's some of these rivalries we would hate to see them lose.
All right, Bud. On that note, then, and we talked about this earlier, because I'd love you to keep the lawyer hat on. Notre Dame and the ACC. They say they want to help them out. They've already got 5 games. If they want to give them 3 more or 4 more, that would mean a few things. One, all of the teams with 8 conference games that don't currently play Notre Dame would then be playing 9. How do you that's its own problem in and of itself. But from what you just said, hey, we're going to add Notre Dame to our schedule, but we dropped Furman or whoever the hell it is. I think what I suggested in the first hour, Bud, was, hey, NBC will gladly write that check to get more Notre Dame football on. Is that what it would take?
I'm sure that the rev share would have to be worked out. I think that Notre Dame, you have an easy in, right? Because you already have a scheduling agreement with them across the conference. They're already sort of a pseudo, like they're an actual member in most of the sports. And then they're not a member in football, but they're kind of like a pseudo member, if you will, with their current 5-game scheduling agreement. I think that they would find a way to play those games against Notre Dame and add those games in. And certainly, like, if you're trying to get Notre Dame to join as a full member at some point, helping them out during a pandemic is not a bad first step, right? That'd be pretty solid for the league.
He's Bud Elliott, 24/7 Sports, also still co-host of Noel Cash. You can follow Bud on Twitter at BudElliott3, Bud Elliott 3. You spend a lot of time with high school football and recruiting. If the high school football season gets pushed back, like let's just say it's 2020, it gets pushed back to winter, or it even gets pushed back to spring. What do you think will be the effect on recruiting? I mean, don't you think most of the big boy schools already, they were on these guys as juniors. They've already offered them. I mean, what do you think it would do to recruiting? Would it affect the top 300? Would it actually affect the second tier recruits? What do you think if high school football happens, but it gets pushed back, it will do?
So I don't think you will see schools sign quite as many kids in the early signing period if that happens, assuming the early signing period still happens. And to be honest, if you're going to push high school football this spring in a large number of states, I really think we should eliminate the early signing period for this year and probably take the February signing date and move it back to April, right? If you're an early enrollee, if you're done with your high school credits and you're going to go in January anyway, that shouldn't change, right? Like we shouldn't take that opportunity away from you. But for the rest of y'all, you're not really enrolling in school anyway until like July or June. So there's no real harm in signing late March or April. And I do think that would give colleges a much better chance to actually evaluate them. It would also give kids a chance to evaluate the colleges, because right now I don't see when these kids are going to visit these campuses and meet with these coaches. You have a lot of players right now who are committed to schools that they've never visited. Many of them have never actually met some of these coaches in person. Like they talked over Zoom, but they've never actually shook hands. They've never seen a kid in person. And I talk to schools all the time. They're like, hey, do you know how tall this kid is? I don't. Like, I wish I had verified testing data, but the shutdown came literally before the camp in that state happened. And so a lot of these schools are flying blind. And, we talk about, hey, they were recruiting these kids since they turned juniors. But, yeah, that's oftentimes off sophomore measurements, right? Like, we didn't have any school summer camps at all this year, which is where you figure out, okay, how big is this kid really entering his senior year? And going off sophomore measurements is a huge pain, and the variance associated with it is pretty great, because let's face it, a lot of these kids are going through puberty. They're growing, and it's tough. Like, I mean, there's guys out there. For instance, I was talking to her the other day, and she's like, hey, how tall is this kid? You know what his reach is? I'm like, his reach? No, I know how tall he is. So I kind of have seen it, but I don't have reach numbers on the guy. And they're like, well, we think he might be a tackle, but we don't know, and we don't have any space for any more guards. I just worry that if we go through with the regular signing process this year, we're going to see a lot of transfers. I do think there's a lot of schools and prospects that are sort of not maybe the right fit for each other right now, just due to incomplete data.
And having spent time as a PR person for a minor league hockey team and knowing how every single player would come into me and tell me what they needed their height and weight to be at so that scouts would think more highly of them, I can't even imagine the fibbing that's going on out of high school juniors and their coaches right now. Bud, my big question, and we kind of talked about this before we had you on quickly, a lot of these conferences, the group of 5 conferences, this is payday time. I happened to look at Kent State just because I was looking at schedules and trying to see if there was a +1 scenario, who everybody had for non-conference games. And Penn State and Alabama both play Kent State. That's got to be $2.5, $3 million into Kent State's coffers for those 2 losses. How is this going to affect the MAC, all these conferences that are payday conferences, the Sun Belt? I mean, this to me could really damage between a number of kids that won't be on campus this year, so you're not getting the administrative fees that pay for athletic departments, and guarantee games. How much trouble could this put certain Division I athletic programs in?
I think it's going to put certain D1 programs in a lot of trouble. However, as you guys know, football will always be the last sport to be cut, right? Like, especially at the D1 level. So I think yesterday we saw Stanford eliminate 11 sports, right? I think you'll probably see quite a few sports get cut if some of these schools don't have football. in the fall. And you mentioned the student fees as well. I mean, look, we have schools in the state of Florida, FIU, UCF, that rely really heavily on student fees to run their athletic programs. If they don't have on-campus classes and they're not able to collect those student activity fees, that's going to be really big for them as well. Something I'm writing about today, if I get the time to do it. Would it make sense to have the NCAA allow a 13th game in 2021 to maybe just push some of these guarantee games back in the non-conference? Or from an FCS standpoint, what if you were allowed to play your spring game against an FCS opponent? That would make sense. And I think, if you said, hey, we'll go ahead and keep the payout to you, and maybe we'll reduce it by X amount. But I think a lot of these schools would rather have that exposure, take a little bit reduced payout rather than being tied up in court for a long time over these games that get canceled. Because a lot of these schools need the money with a quickness.
But they may have to do it, though, for 3 or 4 years. I mean, in all honesty, if you're missing out on 3 or 4 games, like ACC, SEC, if they go conference only, there's 4 games they're going to cancel. The other conferences will cancel 3 games. You may have to allow a 13th game for 3 or 4 years so that everybody can eventually get their game and their payday so that everybody can't sue you. I mean, they may have to. It's a great idea, but I think they'd have to do it for 3 or 4 years. And then, Bud, what will happen? We'll then have 13 weeks to the college football season beginning the middle of the decade going forward because people will get used to it.
And that's not a great thing if you're trying to argue that these players are not employees. Because if you look at the labor argument on the NFL side, what happens? Every time the NFL wants to expand the playoff or expand the season, the labor side kind of goes crazy. So there's a lot of things you have to balance there. I don't know if there is a great solution. I think the FCS thing, playing the FCS game for spring might be the most feasible solution there because almost no team is playing 2 FCS non-conference games, right? At least not that I can think of. So I wonder if that could work. The G5 side of things is tougher. The alternate solution to that might be, what if you could allow the G5, if they want to push their season to spring? I'm sure the TV people wouldn't necessarily hate that quite as much. And maybe you could play a non-conference game in the spring and an FCS game, almost have 2 spring games.
Well, we've argued that some of the
I think that, and it's not a lot of them, but if you're a G5 player that thinks you're playing on Sunday, you wouldn't play in the spring, bud. You couldn't.
Well, I mean, which G5 player do you think is a lock to go in the first round? I would argue probably most of these G5 guys who are still in school are needing that tape, and they're going to want to show out against those good teams.
It would be interesting because the NFL reportedly has already told the major conferences of college football they're not going to push their off-season schedule back next year. They're not going to push the combine. They're not going to push the draft. That if you have to move spring football to the spring, I don't know what to tell you. We're going to go about business as usual. But we think it could mean that there's that maybe the entire MAC, but that there could be 20, 30 schools that come out of this in the next couple of years, and they just drop down to FCS. That they have to go from 85 scholarships to 65. They're like, I don't know what to tell you. We can't afford to play at this level anymore.
There's already some schools I think that should drop to FCS, like UConn, UMass.
Yes.
Some of those very bottom-level schools.
Like the entire MAC. Let's be frank, bud.
But yeah, there's definitely probably 5 or 6 schools in the MAC that are already operating at an FCS level budget. Do you drop New Mexico State? They're fairly low level out there.
Yeah, I mean, and I say that from the MAC. I'm a Michigan kid, but Eastern Michigan's been operating at, I don't even think they've been operating at an FCS level for the last decade. They're barely surviving where they are, and I don't get why, I don't even understand why Georgia Southern, why you'd go D1 when you can win a championship at the FCS level. It doesn't make sense to me. It never has. The App States of the world, but they think they have to.
Yeah, and honestly, they've won games at this level too, and yet financially, I don't know if they've seen tremendous benefits from it.
Well, we even think FAU and FIU
should play football at the FCS level and play everything else in the conference that they're in. Bud, do you, in the next couple of weeks, the SEC's, all the ADs are going to meet with the commissioner on Monday, the ACC Pac-12. Do you think that the Big Ten was rash in their action, or do you think they were just first and everyone else is going to follow suit?
So from what we heard, everybody at the P5 level knew the Big Ten was likely to go conference only, but that it was a pretty big surprise that they announced when they did. I don't know if that's because word got out and they got scooped and they just had to kind of come out with the announcement. At this point, we're just not seeing, not to get, pandemic-y here, but we're not really seeing the flattening of the curve quickly enough to suggest that their move was rash. I think if you tried to play the full season, the problem is just the pushing back and trying to fit all those games in is just really not feasible, I don't think, in the fall with the cancellations that are likely to come. I do think it's kind of feasible to get your 6 divisional games and to try to play a championship game in the fall. I think it's somewhat feasible maybe to think we can get a conference schedule in, play 8 games over the course of 14 weeks and hope that matches up. Playing 12 games over 14 weeks, I just think that you're really kind of pushing up against it. And then also, you look bad if you're having to push back, like, hey, we're going to play October. No, now we're going to play November. Wait, you're going to start a season in November? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But here, because there's only like 8 games or 10 games or whatever, I think it gives you more flexibility as far as scheduling and pushing back.
Bud, thanks for making time for us. We know you're always very busy. I hope you and the family stay safe, and we'll call you next month.
All right, guys. Be well.
Bud Elliott, 24/7 Sports, co-host of Nolecast. Follow him on Twitter at Bud Elliott3, Bud Elliott3, and that's 2 L's and 2 T's with Bud Elliott, who joined us here on Miller and Moulton. Today was the day when, coming up, Jared Bednar, head coach of the Colorado Avalanche. That's right.
My team, go Lanch.
We're talking pucks. He'll join us next hour. Thanks for listening. Southwest Florida's Fox Sports Radio.
Yeah, there's just already too many Elliots in NASCAR. I think that's where you're coming from, Johnny, and I'm with you. But Elliott sounds like, because, you've got Bill Elliott, Chase Elliott, Awesome Bill from Dawsonville, right? Did I get that right, David?
Yes, you did.
All right then. All I know is I just saw this soft serve ice cream trick that someone put on Twitter. Taking the soft serve ice cream cone, putting like a wooden spoon through it, and then the caramel right into that hole before the hard chocolate crust. Holy cow.
Yeah, it's a Miller and Moulton fan. The whole, could the conferences who are playing 8 or 9 games decide to play 10? Yes, but they open themselves up to the lawsuit. You cancel games against Kent State and Furman and whoever it is you're canceling them, and you're most likely canceling a guarantee game. Those schools are going to be like, well, it's one thing to cite this pandemic for canceling our game, but you then can't cancel our game and play a conference game the week we were supposed to play. You can do it if you write us a check. You want to cancel our game, play somebody else, we're fine. Just send us the check.
So our buddy Bobby Riggs just put a tweet up that it took J.R. Smith exactly less than 1 day in the bubble to get in trouble and receive a text telling him to stop his Instagram live.
That's fantastic.
That is outstanding. And apparently he was going through all the snacks he had, complaining about the food. And as Riggs says at the bottom, if they're not testing for weed in Orlando, his snack aisle run was just incredible. David, you'll be proud of me. Last night I had what I'd like to refer to as the 8th grade girl dinner. We went with the Costco frozen cheese pizza, Maddie and I, because Eve was sick. And I had leftover French fries that I did in the air fryer. So, yes, I had cheese pizza and French fries for dinner last night.
Wow.
That is like school cafeteria nirvana right there.
All that was missing was a cheese stick in the school cafeteria line there.
When we talk the talk, this is what we talk about.
He's talking about right and wrong.
We back it up.
That is pretty pathetic.
Eve, okay?
We had a nice night and had some drinks on Wednesday night. And, well, I think my wife had too many and decided to go back in for some birthday cake that was a little older than maybe it should have been in the fridge. And I think the frosting might have had a better day because she said she was violently ill for about 3 hours while I was sound asleep. So she went to work yesterday, got through her surgeries, and came home about 2 and basically has been in bed ever since. And then she went to work in the morning. She slept. Yep. I gave her some chicken noodle soup. She went back to bed. She got up this morning and went to work. And she's got to work tomorrow, too.
Probably feels fine today.
Yeah.
Her coloring's probably a little off, but she probably feels okay.
She was a big fan of Progresso chicken noodle soup.
It is above average.
Yeah, their soups are for canned soup.
Yes.
You got to if you're going to do chicken noodle, you got to get that one because Campbell's that condensed chicken noodle soup sucks. The tomato's fine. The condensed chicken noodle sucks.
God, I hate tomato soup, which is strange because I love tomatoes.
Grilled cheese and tomato soup might be one of my staples in life. I think it's probably the first meal I could cook. Lived on it for a couple of summers. About second, third grade when I became an official latchkey kid. We no longer did the babysitter.
I didn't like tomato juice, and I didn't like tomato soup.
I don't like tomato juice.
I love tomatoes.
I don't like tomato juice.
Weird.
I mean, I like Bloody Marys, but I prefer the Clamato juice over I like the Bloody Caesar as opposed to the Bloody Mary. But, yeah. All right. There we have it. Hell of a discussion there, gang.
Good talk there. You'll have about 4 minutes.
That's all I need. Nothing happened.
7 minutes before 8 o'clock. Miller and Moulton, thanks so much for being with us. Southwest Florida's Fox Sports Radio. You can stream the show, millerandmoulton.com. Hopefully, you'll sign up for the Miller and Moulton YouTube and Twitch.tv channels if you have not already. Without further ado, time for
Miller and Moulton's Today Was the Day When, giving you the history of today's date so you're a beacon of useless knowledge around the office.
Useless, but a lot of fun to talk about.
This is Today Was the Day When, Fox Sports Radio and FoxSportsFM.com.
1926 is where we start today. The U.S. Open. Amateur Bobby Jones, winner of the British 2 weeks earlier, claims his second of 4 U.S. Opens, winning by 1. 1953, Ben Hogan crosses the pond. He did it once. He wins by 4 and never went back.
That's right. That's right. And there was 1 year that he won 3 majors and didn't play in the British.
Right. After that, wanted nothing to do with it again. Right. Went over, won it, and said, screw you guys. I'm done with this. 1964, Tony Lema wins his only major, 5 ahead of Jack at St. Andrews. 1965, the Rolling Stones have their first #1 single, this Satisfaction song. That Mick said, if I'm still playing this when I'm 50, you mean when you're 80?
Right.
Because you're still playing it. 1971, Lee Trevino at Royal Birkdale wins his first of consecutive Open championships. He beat Lu Lang Hung of Taiwan by 1 in that.
Huh.
Right. Who knew? 1976, Johnny Miller wins his only British Open, beating Jack and Seve by 6 in 76.
Yep, he won the U.S. in 73 and the British in 76, and those are his 2 majors.
So 2 movies released in 1981. For all you Disney people, The Fox and the Hound was released, but also Escape from New York. Do you remember what a big deal that movie was supposed to be?
Correct.
I mean, it's a good movie, but
it was okay.
Right, but it was built as this blockbuster.
Mm-hmm.
1985, Playboy publishes nudies of Madonna.
Yes,
I know
they
I
did.
was excited to see him, and then I saw him, and I was not nearly as excited.
Was it Playboy or Penthouse?
Both.
Okay, yeah, because I worked at a convenience store, and we had a bunch of, and you had to put the magazines, and you had to cover them up, and that sort of deal. Yeah, sold a lot of them, though.
I bet you did. 99 World Cup final. U.S. beats China in the women's world final, that is. 5-4 on penalties.
Brandi Chastain took off her top, and the world freaked.
I don't know about freaked. I fell in love. But that's a whole nother story. I still think it's one of the greatest moments ever.
It's one of the great celebrations in sports history.
Andy Murray in 2016 gets his second Wimbledon in third Grand Slam, winning in straight sets. If you were born today, you share your birthday with Jake LaMotta.
1 minute.
The Raging Bull, born today in 1922. Bobo Brazil, the professional wrestler, born today in 1924. Sing a little Rainbow in the Dark later, okay? Just rock with Ronnie James Dio, born today in 1942, the 5'2" rocker. Arthur Ashe, born in 1943. This is for David. 1945, Ron Glass was born.
I don't have cash, but I have something better. I have credit. Barney Miller.
Yeah, there you go. Virginia Wade, born today also in 1945. Arlo Guthrie, singer of Alice's Restaurant, born in 1947. Rick Emmett, the lead singer of Triumph, born today in 1953. Andre Dawson, born today in 1954. Roger Craig is 60. Urban Meyer is 56. And Jessica Simpson is 40.
Let's face it, these are stressful times. New routines, the constant bombardment of bad news, and
So
trying to keep
let me
you and your
just
family
explain to you
safe.
right now. No offense here, Johnny Mac, but chipped beef over toast is arguably one of the grossest foods ever. My ex-grandmother-in-law, I guess, whatever, Grandall, one of the sweetest, most wonderful people. I miss her dearly. My ex-wife's grandma, nobody better than Grandall. Yes, Grandall. Wore all white, and that's all. Her whole house was white. She had a white dog named Christmas. I mean, she was Southern wackadoodle, and I loved every minute of Grandall. But when I went to her house for the first time, we would stay at her house in Columbia, South Carolina. She one morning made frozen chipped beef over toast. And I, of course, being a great guest, told her, oh, this is great. And it was awful. And I hated it. It was like this banquet frozen chipped beef crap that you warmed up and threw over toast. So I made them, oh, I love it. I hated it. Hated every bite. But she thought I liked it. So every single time that we would go back there, she would make it because she thought I liked it. And I would be stuck having to eat that. Oh, was that an inevitable way before? It was just a mistake. As my buddy said in my second marriage, he did a limerick as a toast. He goes, was the first one a mistake? Hell no. That's how we got Jake. Chipped beef on toast. I will say, if you are a chipped beef guy and you're in Fort Myers, Johnny Mac, the guy over at Skinny Dogs serves an SOS of his own style on biscuits. And the food's so good, if that's something you're into, I think it would be worth it. Hey, make sure we're out by like 1920. He needs to start a little early, David. Because he's got to be off by...
Right.
Okay, just...
Yep. Divorce was inevitable. What's Johnny talking about?
Well, my first wife, because I told the story of Grandall making chipped beef, but I don't think that was the reason. I think it's good.
No,
That's it. Miller.
You know what? I'll try to bring you back some fish.
And Moulton.
Okay. You drop it off at the
I mean, Collingwood just took it to him today.
Of course.
Broadcasting live
Who
from
couldn't
the
see that
Kobe
coming?
Cooling Remote Studios, where it's always cool and comfortable.
It's up to you now. It's up to you.
Do you have a final?
It's 59-27 late.
The best local sports show
Minute
this
left.
town has ever heard. Here's Miller and Moulton.
You're live. As we approach a couple minutes past 8 o'clock on this Friday morning, the 10th of July, thanks for making us part of your day. Miller and Moulton, Southwest Florida's Fox Sports Radio. We stream this show at millerandmoulton.com. That's where you can also go to find our poll question every single day, millerandmoulton.com. And hopefully, if you haven't signed up already, you will do so at some point for the Miller and Moulton YouTube and twitch.tv channels. They are free. They are interactive. And so during the commercial breaks, we are usually fairly lively. If not both of us, certainly one of us.
Had to tell my chip beef story during that break. You just walked away from it. Someone was talking, they're having chip beef. I'm like, that is just gross.
I had to show my wife a picture. A former colleague of ours has a bulldog, much like we do. And so, my wife's into pictures of bulldogs, and also there's a story with it. And so I sure. And she's going to leave for work here soon. So, yes, during the break, I got up and I showed her, hey.
Yep, that's where it is. Jared Bednar, head coach of the Colorado Avalanche, coming up in about 20 minutes. And we will take your text, as always, 479-5551, 479-5551. It has been largely a football show because of the Big Ten's announcement yesterday that they are not playing non-conference games. Had Bud Elliott on last hour and talked, when will the rest of the conferences follow suit? He says it's more than likely inevitable. Even if the SEC doesn't want to, their hand has basically been forced by everyone else.
Some really good games are lost just from the Big Ten's announcement. Never mind if the other conferences follow suit. Iowa State, Miami, Michigan State, Ohio State at Oregon, Notre Dame at Wisconsin, Penn State, Virginia Tech, and there are many others. Never mind the ramifications for a group of five and FCS schools that were on these schedules. And it was either a big payday or just the marquee game on the schedule and a chance to really, upgrade their status, et cetera. And if you're a UCF fan, if the ACC goes to this conference only, you lose a couple games, and between hurricanes and now Pens can't get these games in, no matter what it is that you do. 479-5551, 479-5551. Mark, if you were running the other conferences, would you do what the Big Ten has done, or would you go conference plus one? And how far back are you willing to push this season? There's no reason you have to play your conference championship games the first weekend of December. I mean, yes, the NFL plays the next two Saturdays. The NFL does have games, but I don't believe those games are on Fox or CBS. I could be wrong. I think those games are on NBC and or the NFL Network. So, yeah, there may be some television conflicts, but you know what I'm getting at here. I mean, if you're just trying to get a regular season in, you don't have to end it the first weekend of December. You could push it at least one more week, Army-Navy weekend. What's preventing you from pushing it to the third weekend of December? I mean, are you really going to let the New Mexico Bowl get in the way of your regular season?
That's what I said earlier, David. And I know they don't want to, but one of the reasons is I started looking through some of the Big Ten schedules. I think they did what they did. Michigan State and Northwestern open up the season against one another on September 5th. Well, this move tells you that they thought that game was in jeopardy. And that game is obviously much more important than Michigan State and Miami on Saturday, September 26th. So it looks to me like they gave themselves 3 weeks, David. By all accounts, they want to start, if you look at this logically, no later than September 26th. They want to start on time, but they gave themselves a 3-week buffer. Because then even with that, I've just got Sparty's schedule in front of me. They've got an off date on November 7th. So October 3rd now comes into play as a start date, David. And you could still get your 9 conference games in the regular amount of time, consecutive weeks, have the same championship. Still offers you 2 weeks of buffer if you got to slide that sucker back.
And once again, not wanting to get political, but it is interesting to note, if you look at where the coronavirus right now, in terms of number of cases, all right, the 4 hot spot states this week have been California, Arizona, Texas, and Florida. In fact, almost half of the cases in America this week have come from those 4 states. Well, 3 of the 4 are 3 biggest in terms of population, but you know what I'm getting at. Meanwhile, what have we seen? The 2 conferences this week that have made major announcements as to what they're going to do with their schedule has been the Ivy League. Well, that's a Northeast Corridor conference. And the Big Ten. Oh, that's a Ohio Valley Upper Midwest conference for the most part, except for Rutgers and Maryland, which goes back to being Northeast Corridor. And so it's interesting to me, Mark, that like I would have thought the Pac-12 would have been the first one to go here.
If you want to know where my shock is that wasn't the case. I thought the Pac-12 would have done this long before. I mean, we were talking about them canceling the season earlier this week and moving it to the spring.
For a couple of reasons. 1, 2 of the 4 states that I mentioned, there was 6 Pac-12 teams in those 2 states, number 1. Number 2, if you look at the states that are in the Pac-12 conference, not every single one of them, okay, but there are a few very liberal states. And so you would think that the people running those universities also think ideologically along those lines, and that they would be the ones who would be quicker to put the brakes on. And so that's why, to me, not that we don't have liberal universities in the Big Ten, all right, and goodness knows the Ivy League, not all of them, but there's a few of them that are a bastion of liberalism. But, it is interesting to me geographically, and with what we have been hearing in the news for the last couple of weeks, if you were to look at the map and carve out your little semicircle, you would have thought the semicircle would have been the far west into the southwest or the southwest into the southeast. And instead, the semicircle is to the first, hey, we're going to pump the brakes here, and we're probably pushing things back, is actually in the part of the country where right now you're thinking you have a better chance to get some semblance of this season in than in other parts.
A couple of people on our Twitch chat room have keep mentioning travel and non-conference games. This is not about travel. Take that out of what your arguments are. This has nothing to do with travel schedules. People are going to throw that out there. It has to do with your conference schedule being more important to finish. If you are going to sacrifice games, you are not going to sacrifice conference games. I just pulled up the September 5th schedule to give you an idea of why the Big Ten may have made the move that they did. Because there are all kinds of conference games week 1 in the Big Ten. Purdue plays Nebraska. Already mentioned Sparty and Northwestern play one another. And Indiana plays Wisconsin on Friday, September 4th. That's what this is about. This is giving them a 3-week buffer to get in conference games. Also, the other thing Bud Elliott mentioned that was right on point in our interview with him about 40 minutes ago is that if you play your games within the conference, all of the testing protocol can be the same. We have talked about this forever on this show, but a lot recently is that there is no czar of college football. Each commissioner is the power broker for that conference, and not one of those commissioners is willing to give up any power to a conference not named theirs.
Correct.
So this is about controlling your conference, getting your conference games in, taking care of your network requirements, which is the most important thing to the Big Ten, is the Big Ten network. And Fox, their partner. That's what this is about. So what does the SEC and the ACC do because they play 8 conference games.
And the others play 9. Now, you could argue they just keep 8 and it gives them an extra week buffer. They've got 13 weeks to get in 8 games, while the other 3 Power 5 conferences have 13 weeks to get in 9. And I say 13 weeks because there's 4 weekends in September and November, and there are 5 in October. And then that's with the conference championship game staying in the first weekend of December. But, do we think each conference wants to keep their conference championship game? Yes, we do. Part of the reason is it's a cash grab. Well, it could only be half the cash grab that it normally is. Right now, if we had to wager, also to think about how rapidly this is moving. And it's why I feel comfortable in saying I think the Big Ten jumped the gun yesterday. I do. I didn't think July 9th was when you had to be announcing this. I thought you could have chilled out for a couple of weeks. Your mind may not have changed at all, but I think you had time here. I really do. So I am curious as to why July 9th. All right, but Gene Smith, the AD at Ohio State, Mark, it wasn't 2 weeks ago, not 2 weeks ago, that Gene Smith was asked, hey, I think you're going to play football? Oh, yeah. Okay. How many people do you think you're going to have at games? And he said, and I quote, we're hoping for 40 to 50,000.
Listen to him on Real Sports say the same thing.
Right. 40 to 50,000. Okay. Now, the shoe holds what, around 90?
Might even be more now that they closed in the one side.
So, he's thinking at around 50% of capacity. Well, now what do you think that he and they are thinking in terms of attendance 2 weeks later, if they've already essentially said, we're going to have to build in time to get in these 9 games because we think the coronavirus is going to play havoc with our schedule.
Yeah, they hold 105 there now, basically, with the addition. But
so, they were talking about 40 to 50% of capacity.
Right.
Right. And now, the Ravens came out 2 days ago and said 14,000. That'll be our maximum capacity, 14,000. Well, they're in Big Ten country. I don't think the Ravens play all that far away from the University of Maryland.
Stop it. Would you? I'm going to jump through this screen and punch you right in the nose.
I did that.
The Ravens are in Big Ten country. I know what you're trying to do, and it worked.
I just wanted to get a rise out of you.
It worked. And someone texted the show on the Williamson Brothers Marine and Roofing text line. So we're going to push everything right into spring in the middle of flu season. No, we're not. If you listen to Bud Elliott, this move more than anything is to get football in the fall.
Yeah.
Their
last ditch is pushing it into 2021. They desperately do not want to do that because think about it. Then they have no wiggle room at all. None. Something goes wrong there, you know what. And that is financial ruin. Ruin. We cannot emphasize it enough. These games got to air on television. These checks have to come in and get cashed.
In the fall. It is imperative. The Big Ten made the decision yesterday that 9 or 8, because I really think there's a better chance of this decreasing to 8 than go to 10. People are already talking. I saw one of the Ohio State guys I follow on Twitter going, hey, if we added a 10th game, should it be Wisconsin? Should it be Purdue? Or should we play Michigan twice? Listen, they're not adding a 10th game. I would bet a lot of money on 8 over 10. They made the move yesterday that says 9 is better than 12. 9 in the fall is better than 12 and a chance of 12 in the spring. And I guarantee you they'd all say 8 in the fall is better than 10 or 12 in the spring. Because there's an unknown factor, and the other side of this is the NFL has already told them to pound sand on their draft. So if you're Trevor Lawrence and you're getting ready to get drafted and they move the games to the spring, you're not playing.
A lot of pressure.
I wouldn't. You're sacrificing generational money to play a college football season? Are you out of your mind?
Listen, if I was Trevor Lawrence's dad, the kid would be in Bradenton watching WNBA games, training at IMG is what he'd be doing. Give me a break playing this year. What? If he doesn't play this year, he may go second or third in the draft?
Right. Right. Okay.
You want to take Fields ahead of my son? That's fine.
Hey, Bill. Hey, Polian, I'll make a bet on that one, too.
Yeah, that's fine. Knock yourself out, 479-5551. That's the Williamson Brothers Marine and Roofing text and talk line. Do you think there is a conference commissioner and a conference here who, once again, not to play politics, but, there have been governors who have looked around at what other governors have done and, rightly or wrongly, and have said, yeah, we're not doing that. No, that's not how we're going to do things here. No, we're going to do this. Whether it's, open up sooner or open up more or, Governor DeSantis, executive order earlier this week, Florida schools are starting on time. That's it. Came down from the and I still haven't heard the question. This will be the last thing that I mention that's anything close to political. I have no idea in this state, does a local community have the authority to override an executive order from Tallahassee?
I think so, because I thought Miami already delayed their schools yesterday.
Okay.
I think so, but I'm not positive, David.
Right.
I don't. And I'm a parent, and I haven't had a chance to read through all of this. And that's a whole another mess. But
if
yes.
you're running the Mountain West, though, do you look around and go, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. Most of the states out here, if you take a look at the map, we're in yellow. Okay. We got this thing under control. Not every state, but a lot of them. And we're ready to go. I don't know what to tell you. We're ready. Like in another game that doesn't get talked about, but it would be a bummer for your wife. Your wife's a Colorado State alum. Week 1, they host, by the way, in Fort Collins on CBS at 3:30. They host Colorado. If Colorado State only played one game this year, Mark, what game would they want to play?
That one.
And quite frankly, if you asked Colorado, where would the Colorado State game rank? It wouldn't be the USC game. There'd be one or two others, but I'll bet you it'd be on their top 4 games they'd want to play this year.
Yeah, they don't play Nebraska anymore, do they?
No, they outside of the USC game, I think they might put Colorado State number 2. And that's why I wonder, will there be these other conferences that lobby their commissioner, see what the Big Ten did and go, hey, can you give us conference +1? We each have a game for whatever reason that we want to play. We'll make it work. We'll be done in time for conference championship weekend. We'll get it in. We'll get it done. We'll take the risk. Like USC, they play Notre Dame. You can't tell me USC doesn't want to play that game.
And it's in December or late November or whenever the hell it is.
Right. It's the Saturday after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And it's home this year also for USC, I think.
But it doesn't matter where it is. That's a game that's the most important game on the USC schedule.
You could argue it.
Year in, year out, it is.
So that's just wondering, will there be a conference that first off just looks at the Big Ten and or some of the others that are expected to follow and goes, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. We're not doing this. And we'll figure it out. And or will the other conferences look at the Big Ten and say, okay, but we're going to go conference +1 because everybody's got a game that they need to play. Miller and Moulton. Jared Bednar, the head coach of the Colorado Avalanche. Hockey training camps open next week. Season going to begin right around August 1, only a couple days after the NBA. We'll talk a little pucks next. Miller and Moulton, Southwest Florida's Fox Sports Radio.
How about that, Bedsy calling in early? Look at that.
Look at that.
Look at that. Hockey coaches. That's hockey coaches, everybody.
I know.
Absolute best.
The information you need.
Every single day there's a news story.
We got a story. We've been working on that all.
Trenton GL makes a good point about Florida State. Okay. Was it a law or was it just legend has it was going to be a law? And that's when Florida said, okay, we'll play. Now, there's usually, just like in standard contracts, there are, but you doubt they put it in a contract. Like in 2001, for instance, Mark, Florida, because the weekend got canceled for September 11th when they were supposed to play Tennessee,
Well, the SEC pushed their championship game back a week. Florida still played Florida State, and then they played Tennessee after playing Florida State.
Turn on your spa, and it'll be warm when you get home. Free on-site evaluations. We're a family company.
That is interesting. Whether or not A, there is a state law, and B,
I'm checking right now.
Is there a, if there is one, is there a clause in it in which this fits? You would think, like you doubt anybody thought of putting pandemic or act of God or something like that in it.
You can still get
Which would mean hurricane.
but only at Naples Nissan. Hundreds of new SUV models to choose from, all backed by our exclusive unlimited mile lifetime warranty. Pick out your favorite at NaplesNissan.com. Then come see us on Pine Ridge Road.
All right, it says that they're like
current market value for your trade-in.
the State Board of Control ordered Florida to play Florida State in football.
Ordered them.
Ordered, but I don't know.
KBB says it's worth $5,000. Naples Nissan will give you $13,000.
Basically, the governor was pissed that this was on the floor of the Senate. Thought it was just stupid that we're wasting time for football. But he called both presidents of both universities to Tallahassee to meet with him in the Board of Control.
Nice.
Let me know when we get to a minute there, Jero.
Okay.
Do you panic when someone says we need to talk? Well, here it goes. We need to talk, but don't panic. This is a good kind of talk. Those glasses and contacts you're sporting, they're just in the way of you having the freedom to enjoy a more flexible lifestyle. France Eye Care wants to offer you $1,000. Hey, I'll introduce them, and why don't you just take it and run a while?
All right.
You know them.
Team of surgeons want to help you see your future in 2020 through the advanced technology of laser vision correction. So what if you've been told you're not a candidate for LASIK? France Eye Care wants you to know there are other options available. But to learn more, you need to call now. Schedule your free screening. Take advantage of that $1,000 off bilateral LASIK special. Financing options available. It's time for you to experience better vision and a better life. Dial ** 2020 from your mobile phone.
France Eye Care.
1 minute.
Looking for a frameless shower door? My Shower Door has just opened their
Oh, we just got a wonderful email, David.
Conveniently located in Cape Coral.
We get yelled at again?
No.
1,000 frameless shower doors installed.
Just how little
no one has more
we earned.
And 5-star reviews.
Oh, no.
My Shower Door. We've been named #1 by readers of the News Press and Naples
Oh,
News
God.
for 17 consecutive years and have just been named as Lee County's manufacturer of the
I'm gonna have to get a job.
See more? Go to myshowerdor.com.
No matter where you're voting, with Towboat US, you're covered.
Millsy, what's up?
Betsy, good morning, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing good. Doing good.
You got to be about ready to get this stuff started.
Yeah, it's overdue.
Holy cow.
The last couple of weeks, especially since we've kind of known for sure that we're coming back and, it's just starting to drag, I think everyone's excited to get going, which is a good thing. So, yeah.
Well, I like the fact that you're going to Edmonton now and not Toronto. That did make a whole hell of a lot of sense.
Switching sides, like east-west. Yeah.
All right. Here we go, Betsy. Thanks.
Serious they were with that. Yeah.
Is Miller and Moulton.
You're live.
25 minutes past the hour. Thanks so much for being with us, Miller and Moulton. Southwest Florida's Fox Sports Radio, streaming at millerandmoulton.com, and you can watch and interact with us during the breaks on the Miller and Moulton YouTube and Twitch.tv channels. Pleasure to welcome Jared Bednar. He's the head coach of the Colorado Avalanche. He's in his 4th season, and he won a championship as a coach in the ECHL and in the AHL, and looking to do it now in the NHL. Coach, thanks for your time. How are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Jared, this has been, this year, you guys had a lot of expectations, and all of a sudden the season comes to a halt. How difficult has this time off been for you, for your guys? Just kind of give us a quick run through from when the season ended until, I guess, in the last couple of weeks when you found out we're actually going to finish this sucker.
Yeah, well, it came to an end very abruptly. We didn't really have any notice. We were playing a game against the Rangers at home, and we got indication just earlier in that day that the NBA was going to go on pause. And by the time we finished our game, we knew that we were going on pause. And more information than that. So that was a little bit tough. You know, we were, like you said, having a pretty good year and feeling good about ourselves going down the stretch run and getting ready to enter the playoffs, and all of a sudden we're on stop. So I think a lot of uncertainty early, guys just kind of waiting around. Once we got the indication it could be a little while, all of our players dispersed back to their summer homes or homes in, whether it was in the U.S. or in other countries, and kind of waited this thing out and started training and doing whatever they could to stay in shape and get back on the ice if possible. And when we got the indication that we were going to come back here and finish this thing off, I think everyone has been really good. They're excited to get back. Guys came back in early, started training here. As we opened phase 2, we almost had our full roster here and ready to skate. And, you know, the last couple of weeks have dragged out a little bit, and guys are just anxious to get back on the ice and get some closure to the season and take a run at the cup here, hopefully.
Well, there's no doubt that this team is poised for it. You're a pretty young group, Jared. So, I mean, who has an advantage coming off this? We talked a little bit yesterday. Boston's an older team. I mean, I'd have to think for a bunch of older guys to get a break this time of year would be beneficial. But do you think that there's any one group, older team, younger team, that has an advantage coming back?
I don't think so. I think it depends on your team and your group. I think it's the team that has the advantage for me is the team that can get emotionally invested in this the quickest. You know, I think everyone, as far as coaches and teams, have plenty of time to get back up to speed systematically. I think the players do such an amazing job now of just staying in game shape and being ready to play year round. It's a lifestyle for them now. There's really no off season. They take a little bit of time off just to heal their bumps and bruises, and then they're back training and trying to better themselves from the year before. Old or young, doesn't matter. And it's just the different circumstances. It'll be the first time everyone's kind of going through it. No fans. You got to create your own emotion. You got to be able to get invested physically right away, and you got to rely on yourself and your teammates to do that, because the outside energy in the building is just not going to be there. So it's going to be the team that wants it more and that can sort of dial that part of their game up and you know, block out the surroundings is the team that's going to have the success, I believe.
Talking with Jared Bednar, head coach of the Colorado Avalanche, and you mentioned where I wanted to go next, Coach. No fans, no atmosphere. Yeah. I mean, of all the sports, hockey, I mean, you guys put fourth lines together to create energy, to create momentum. And basically now you might as well play these games at 9 o'clock in the morning like you're having a morning skate. That's going to be the atmosphere at these games. You played, coaching now. How weird is this going to be?
It's going to be strange. Yeah, I've tried to picture myself in this situation, you know, as our players have, and I've talked to a number of them about it. It's just going to be different, you know. It's obviously not the way we want to play. We play because and coach and we're part of the game because of the you know, the energy that the fans bring and how fun it is to play in front of the NHL fans or hockey fans in general. And it's going to be different. All one location, you know, so you're always going back to the same rink, same room. You may see a different opponent here and there, but you're playing in the same location. No home ice advantage with your fans and the emotion of going into the road building and playing against a team where their fans are all over you. It will be different, but it's different for everybody, and everyone's going through it for the first time. So it's going to be a unique experience. I'm kind of picturing it, you know, like I haven't coached in any major tournaments as far as like Olympics or World Championships and that, but everyone going to one location and playing it out till you have a winner is the way I kind of picture this, but just with a different set of circumstances and surroundings.
Jared, were you playing or coaching on the South Carolina team that played the Everblades in the one-game rec rink playoff?
I was playing. That was my last year. Yeah.
That was your last game. Holy cow. But I mean, you know, for those Everblades fans, the Everblades went and they got we called it the toilet bowl, but a one-game playoff against South Carolina, they did not have rink availability. So the game was played in their practice rink. Now, there were fans, but it was played in a rink. There was, I don't know, maybe 1,500 people there, 1,000 people. Like, to me, Jared, this is going to be as close to that as anything else, because I just remember how strange that game sounded, how loud it is inside of a practice rink. Are you guys playing in 20,000-seat arenas? Have they told you where you're playing the games yet?
Yeah, we're going to play in Edmonton. So the two hub cities are Edmonton and Toronto. The West is staying in the West and going to Edmonton, and the East is going to Toronto. So, that was, there was a bunch of teams in on that. We didn't really know where we were going. There was a lot of speculation. But because of the COVID numbers in Edmonton and their setup with their new arena and the practice rink built in, through all the different scenarios on where the best places are and the safest places are to be able to continue this thing, and we're going to Edmonton. So we're scheduled to start camp here on Monday the 13th, and possibly head to the hub cities on the 26th, and then get an exhibition game in. And for us, our situation, we finished top 4, so we get to play a round robin with 3 other teams for our seeding while the play-in series is going on, and then we'll be down to 16 teams and starting playoffs within a week, 10 days of getting to the hub city, I believe.
Are we hockey fans going to find out which coaches have the best vocabulary with the officials? That's another thing. I mean, are you going to have to adjust what it is you've been saying, or are we going to find out that, so-and-so who coaches such and such is that, this guy's a little lively than you guys thought?
Yeah, I think I don't think there'll be much adjustment there. I think they're kind of used to one another, and for the most part, I think we're as players and coaches and referees, that it's pretty respectful, So but when things do get heated up, the emotion of the game in the playoffs is obviously elevated, and that's what we like about it, that passion and little extra everybody gives. So it's certainly going to be fun. I wish the fans could be there. Obviously for this season, they're not going to be able to. Hopefully they all get on TV and everyone gets to watch them. There's been a lot of hockey on. It's my understanding that there's possibility of 3 games a day, East and West, at the start of this thing when there's 24 teams involved. So there's going to be a lot of hockey to watch. If anyone's bored, they can get on the TV and take in their favorite team. That's for sure.
Do you guys how many practice rinks are there? I mean, it's Edmonton, so I know there are rinks everywhere. Does every team have their own rink to practice in, or is it going to be so many games that there really aren't many days off, Jared?
The schedule is going to be tight. It's. I expect it to be tighter than the regular playoffs, just because you're there and there's no travel. But there are going to be a number of rinks. Just in the Edmonton game rink alone, they have the game rink and a practice facility right in there. And then they have another couple of rinks, is my understanding. But we haven't got all the details exactly of how Phase 4 is going to work. Phase 3 for us is starting Monday, which is training camp. We're supposed to be starting Monday, and then Phase 4 details, we don't have them all just yet. So I'm expecting that we'll get some more information here by the end of the weekend.
Because the season is now so compressed, are you going to have to – does practice mean more in a sense where if a guy's got some jump who normally hasn't been in the lineup but another guy doesn't, because these points are so valuable and then the playoffs start, or if a goalie, if your backup goalie just seems a little hotter than your starting goalie, are you going to have to maybe play somebody a little bit more and go by practice as opposed to resume and reputation, because this is such a pressure-filled situation?
I think – you know what? We have quite a bit of time here for training camp. Like a 2-week training camp for us, with what we're allowed to bring in for players, is 30 players. Our regular training camp is more like 3 weeks, but we'd start with 60 guys. So we have lots of time, I feel, as a coach, to get our team up to speed, especially with the training that they're already doing and here for Phase 2. I think you do always, as a coach, you got to recognize when guys are at the top of their game and they got a little extra jump and they're ready to, and engaged to help you win. I think you want to try and recognize that period to period, game to game. Where can you juggle things that give you just a slight advantage? I do think the goaltending is an interesting one, right? Like, players can go out and skate and train and stick handle and shoot pucks and engage in scrimmages, and the goalies, it's just different. It's really tough for goalies to take a lot of time off and still, even if they're on the ice, to try and get the type of shots they would get during a game. So goaltending is always a key. I feel like it's going to be even elevated this year just because of the circumstances going into this thing. So I think you really got to look at your goaltending, and we've had 2 goaltenders that played amazing for us this year. So and split the load a little bit because of the injuries. So we'll have to pay attention to that, play them both in our round robin, and then make a decision on who we feel is best ready to help us win going into game 1 of the playoffs.
Bedsy, I really appreciate you doing this for us. It's great to catch up, great to talk to you again. Wishing you all the best of luck in this thing, and hopefully as the playoffs go on, maybe we can chat one or two more times before you get done with this sucker, and hopefully it ends with a great run to the Cup.
Yeah, thank you. Great. Thanks for having me on. It's great catching up with you again. Take care, you guys.
Jared Bednar.
Head coach of the Colorado Avalanche. They had the second best record in the Western Conference. They were just 2 points behind the defending Stanley Cup champion St. Louis Blues when the season came to a halt. And Mark, listen, there are teams. They were a game away from the conference finals last year. They almost played the Blues. The Blues won Game 7 of their second round series in double overtime, and the Lanch got absolutely hosed in their series by a horrible officiating mistake, and they ended up losing a 1-goal game in Game 7 of their second round series. I mean, it easily
could have been the San Jose series, right, with the 5-minute penalty. That was a joke.
Yeah. Well, that was Vegas.
Oh, that was Vegas. I'm sorry.
But then there was the controversial line change, and the box was right by the blue line, and it was actually offsides. It wasn't called, and a goal got scored on Colorado, and it made a huge difference. Probably determined the outcome of Game 7, actually. So, I mean, it could have easily – first off, St. Louis was a goal away from getting knocked out in the second round, and if the puck had gone a certain way, I mean, we might be talking to just like we talked to Nick Nurse last week, who's the head coach of the defending NBA champion Toronto Raptors. The Lanch were a bounce of the puck away, quite frankly.
Oh, yeah. And they're, like he said, second. Dallas, Vegas, the Lanch, and the Blues are the 4 teams fighting out for the top seeds. And that's what's crazy, is that they're playing this round robin while the first round series are going on to figure – I mean, it is a wild setup as to how they're doing this.
Right. You've got 16 teams that are essentially playing a play-in playoff series. It's a best of 5. 8 teams obviously will emerge from those series. Then you've got 4 teams in each conference that are playing a round robin. They're starting from scratch. So what you did before means nothing. They're all starting with 0 points, and based on how they do in their 5 games against one another will determine if they're seeded 1, 2, 3, or 4, and then they'll be paired up against the 8, that advance, and then we'll go forward. And we'll have 8 teams in each side, and then the playoffs as we know it will begin with best of 7s.
So I had a late night trip I had to make last night, David. Daughter was in bed, wife was sick in bed, and it was 9 o'clock, and I wanted ice cream.
Oh, so you had to make it.
So I went to Culver's to get me a concrete mixer because they're delicious.
Okay.
And while driving, I was kind of just flipping NFL radio, NASCAR.
You didn't.
Well,
Tell me you didn't.
I threw it on for a second because I had it on in the house when I left. But I'm like, I can miss this little bit of the race and get back. And I ended up settling on the Vegas, the VSiN network. Just to hear what it is. Well, because I go to that network a lot during football season because there's some really good programming that, as like fantasy football gives you ideas about the games, some of their shows, when they get into the lines, give you some really good information about the actual game. Well, I've not listened to it because there's nothing to bet on. What the hell? It's been tough enough for us. How do you do hours upon hours on just gambling when there's nothing to gamble on.
Right, golf, tennis, and ping pong.
Well, and you can't even bet on the table tennis anymore because they took that off the books.
In Jersey, they did, right?
Yeah, they took the
they
Russian
don't
table
think
tennis.
The ping pong is on the up and up. I love it.
Wish I was on the inside. That's all I'm saying.
Russian ping pong is not on the up and up, ladies and gentlemen.
But the one thing the two guys really got into is like, this hockey's going to be great. Because, as Jared said, they're going to be playing 3 games in a day. I mean, even the MLS is playing like 1 game right now. What the hell's going on? Give me some games.
Yeah.
And they're going to be playing 2 and 3 games a day. So if you want to chase some cash, the NHL is your new horse race. I'm telling you that right now.
It is going to be interesting. How much will they pipe fake crowd noise in? I think they'll have to. How much of it will they do? Because as we've talked about, the sounds that come from an empty rink are not pleasant sounds. They're harsh sounds. Okay, the puck hitting the boards and off the glass, and it echoes.
Well,
and the
the
last thing you want in a television broadcast is sound that echoes.
And just think, the dump and chase and that big hit will just vibrate.
Oh, my goodness. So, but yeah, hockey training camps. I mean, NBA training camps underway as of yesterday. Hockey training camps underway in the next couple days. NBA is supposed to start on July 30th. I think they're talking August 1, the NHL, which is, only obviously a couple days later. The hockey will get done. They've said Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals, the latest it could be is October 2nd. And I believe Game 7 of the NBA Finals could go as late as October 12th. NHL season supposed to resume. Next year's season supposed to start December 1st. If you play in the Stanley Cup Finals, Mark, how many days do you think you get off before, quote-unquote, training camp starts for the next year?
What's Game 7 again? What's your date?
It could be October 2nd. Regular season will start December 1st.
I'd love to ask Jared that question if they win it. When you open in camp.
Right.
Because if it was normally going to be, let's just say, November 4th, and you go all the way to the end, don't you just say, guys, show up November 15th, we'll get this sucker started? Do you really need that much time?
And also, remember, the 2 teams that play in the Stanley Cup Final, in theory, unless it's Toronto or Edmonton, because then obviously they could be home, these will be guys who will have been away from their families for 3 months. Okay, so in other words, they'll also be looking at the coach going, please tell me you're going to let us, go home. I don't want to see you, coach, for a while. Love you and all. But I really don't want to see you. We're playing on December 1st. Could we reconvene in Thanksgiving?
Here's the other problem. These things called free agents, David.
Right.
Because whoever plays in the final, there'll be 8 to 10 players that will not be back on those 2 teams.
Right.
And they're not going to want to give guys a break. They're going to want to get started. They've been off for a while. You win a cup and then you go play for the Wings who weren't in the playoffs.
I will say the NHL and NBA free agency seasons, they're normally wild.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, literally all the business is going to have to get done in 5 days. It will be just bat blank crazy, the off seasons in those 2 sports.
Just hope we finish season so we can have the frantic off seasons, David.
Yes, that is true. That is true. 15 minutes before the top of the hour, the good, the bad, and the ugly on what has predominantly been a football Friday, with the 2020 future of football very uncertain. Miller and Moulton, thanks for being with us. Southwest Florida's Fox Sports Radio.
Welcome to the program.
This is the Dan Patrick Show.
Talked a little bit about the McGuire-Sosa documentary, and I think if this was last year at this time, we'd probably go, oh, that was pretty good. But right now, after
so that's the one thing that our guest yesterday and Bednar agree upon. Basically, the goaltending thing that you're going to have to you're going to have to just ride a hot goalie. It could go day to day. You could see where coaches. How it used to be quite a few years ago.
Yeah, hot hand.
I mean, the Islanders under Al Arbor, until he chose Billy Smith,
Al Arbor would go back and forth for a few years there when they were trying to win their first cup between Billy Smith and Chico Resch.
Well, and I remember Toronto had two goalies, and they both used to beat the Wings so bad in the playoffs, the Wings ended up getting one of them. Did they have Bester and Healy for a while or something like that?
Yes. Yeah.
Boston did forever?
Yes.
I mean, a lot of teams did.
I remember the Devils, actually, in 94. They had a second-round series, I think, they had a series against Buffalo. Chris Terreri basically played most of that series in goal. Well, hey, the first year that the Wings won the Cup under Scotty Bowman there. I mean, Osgood was the number one goalie all year. Okay, and come playoff time, what did he do? He played Vernon.
Free on-site evaluations. We're a family company, and for over 40 years, we've been doing business right.
No, I lost you.
Sorry, I'm trying to get these done here. I talked to you got 12 people here listening to you.
We've got our good friend Tim Meister, owner of the Floor Meisters in Naples, on the phone. We're talking about their huge selection and great pricing on Core-Tech flooring. Tim, tell us what's new at the store.
Plumber 425, you said, what about Army in terms of football? True, they don't have a conference. I'll say this. Army just lost a game the second weekend of October, and Notre Dame is likely going to lose the Stanford game that week. I would have to believe that Army could get on Notre Dame's schedule. Another game that we haven't talked about, Army, although the Big 12, Bowlesby yesterday was the only commissioner that sounded like he was like, hey, let's pump the brakes here, which I thought was interesting, number one. And number two, I think Oklahoma was supposed to visit Army this year. Boy, that's a tough game to lose if you're Army. But yeah, Notre Dame, BYU, Army. Oh boy.
Play Fox Sports FM on TuneIn.
And I am shocked. I'll say it again, and I know nobody cares. But UConn, and they cut like 5 sports and this, that, and the other thing. I thought UConn was just going to drop down from FBS to FCS. I really did. I thought they were just going to say, hey, we're back in the Big East in basketball. It's the only thing our people really care about. We're not a football school. It's financially cost us a fortune. And you know what? Like Villanova, our Big East brethren, we actually have a chance to compete at the FCS level. We can be a top 10 team. We could make the playoffs. We could play for something as an FCS school.
Hey, I mean, you heard what Bud said, that basically their MAC schools have been running on FCS budgets for years.
But also, so have UMass and
I know.
And Connecticut.
The single greatest issue for guys with low T is mood. And the single greatest change for men that get low T care is a greatly improved mood. Many are grumpy when they start, and most can't believe how much their mood improves once they get treated. And everything improves once your mood improves.
I got to believe if the ACC is going to help Notre Dame out, I would think some schools would help Army out.
I definitely think schools will help Army out, David.
That would be a bad look for
Correct.
college football.
What are you going to do? Tell Navy they're not playing non-conference? I mean, think about that. AAC says we're not playing non-conference games, and you're Navy. What do you do?
Well, you tell them to go pound sand.
From the best headlines,
the best,
to the worst.
It's the worst thing that ever happened to anybody ever.
Prepare yourself and hide the women and children. This is Mark Miller's Good, Bad, and Ugly on Fox Sports Radio.
You're live.
We go to New York City for the good, where Our Hearts is a group that's been organized by Thaddeus Umster. And they have been putting refrigerators around New York City full of food. They just pop up in certain places. The grassroots organization is focused on building a culture of resistance to combat food insecurity. It's just an act of charity, not offering handouts, just sharing what we have extra of. It's an act of solidarity, and it's very mutual. I eat this food too, is what their organizer said. That's kind of cool. For the bad, you know, these kids, David, in that TikTok thing, it's pretty big. In fact, so big, apparently, one of my best friends in the world, his son's like a TikTok star, has over 1 million followers on TikTok.
Wow.
But this group of teens were doing some TikTok videos on a Seattle beach when they found a suitcase and a stick and a black trash bag, so they wanted to open it up. Apparently, they found 2 murder victims inside of bags.
Whoa.
They called police, and family members started a GoFundMe campaign to raise reward money to search for the killers, but the teens were a little overwhelmed on discovering the 2 bodies on the beach.
Could see where they would be.
Yeah. Finally, the ugly. We go to the Ukraine, where a 31-year-old Instagram model made international news because she likes to, well, fill her cheeks up. Only instead of seeking a professional to carry out the procedure, she took it upon herself to inject her own face with the acid. Now, well, she doesn't look very much like a human.
Oh, no.
Her 158,000 fans on Instagram are really enjoying the look of this former woman. And that is the good, the bad, and the ugly on today, July the 10th, 2020.
Miller and Moulton on this Football Friday, the day after the Big Ten has announced that they will only play conference games this coming season. It means that games lost are Ohio State, Oregon, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Miami, Michigan State, Iowa State, and a whole bunch of others. And the ACC and Pac-12 indicated that they are likely to follow suit. But, you know, Mark, during the break there, we just stumbled upon something. And while we have brought up Navy and we have brought up Army, we did not bring up Army playing Navy. What happens if Mike Oresco and the AAC decide to follow suit and say we'll only play conference games? Army's not in the AAC.
Right. Everybody's talking about, you know, what we doing with Army and Notre Dame. What are we doing with Army Navy, everyone? Answer that question for me.
I mean, don't you think that for that reason and that reason only, the AAC is going to have a different policy? Now, I do think the rest of the AAC, like I think UCF would understand if they literally say we're going to play conference games and then Army and Navy are going to play. I really do believe that the rest of the conference would understand. It would be a really bad look if you're a school or an AD and you come out against the Army-Navy game. That's a bad look.
I understand. My only question, we probably should have asked it of Bud Elliott. Is the AAC guaranteeing some of these FIUs any money for showing up and getting beat? I don't know the answer to that, David.
Yeah, I don't know either.
And I really don't. And that, to me, is the first thing, because what Bud Elliott talked about, well, you're going to schedule this game and travel here but not play us. I just would hope that a lower-level school wouldn't sue an AAC school because of the Army-Navy game, but it's just something I think you have to take into consideration.
The one good thing, though, is first off, I do think you could go to court and you could argue, listen, there are certain games that kind of define the sport. This is one of them. Secondly, it's the very last game of the regular season. I mean, don't give me, like, if FIU were to take UCF to court or the AAC to court because they lost out on a payday against UCF, I mean, I could see where if you're the AAC, you go, well, you know, a game in the second weekend of December doesn't affect FIU. It's the last game of the college football season. You know, this does not affect you. We did not, I'm sorry, don't know what to tell you. It's Army-Navy.
I got you, and I think ultimately that common sense will win out. I just think it needs to at least be discussed.
Yes, absolutely. And I wonder if you're the AAC, do you even run the risk? Or if you're Mike Oresco, the commissioner, you just go, we're going to do conference games +1. And they will do that with the Army-Navy game in mind. I mean, because literally, if you said to both schools, if you could only play one game this year, they would go, well,
that's it.
I mean, because, here's the other thing. They also both play Air Force. They play this little thing called the Commander-in-Chief Trophy. It's kind of a big deal. It really is. Army won it a couple years ago. Hadn't won it since like 96. They went bat blank crazy. Air Force won it once recently. They hadn't won it in a while. And so, I mean, so Mark, here's another thing. If Air Force is in the Mountain West, if you're the AAC and you go conference games +1, well, they're going to choose, Navy's going to choose Army.
Right.
So that means they're not going to play Air Force?
Right.
Now, I understand, hey, it's a coronavirus year, and, you just chalk it up and go, hey, don't know what to tell you. We can't fix every problem. But it would be something if we can't hand out a commander-in-chief trophy this year. Because 3 schools couldn't play one another once. There's not a lot of games here.
1 minute.
So the Big Ten made their decision. It impacts a lot of other conferences. And we just pointed out the Mountain West, the AAC, and Army have a dilemma ahead of them as well. Lots of sports to watch today, David. Golf, 2 tournaments. The Workday Charity at 3. Then they've got the celebrity thing, the Tony Romo Open, as they call it, in Tahoe at 5. Another Xfinity race tonight, back-to-back, 8 o'clock. And then soccer at 9.
So it's not NASCAR tonight?
No.
Oh, it's
back-to-back Xfinity races.
Gotcha.
In Kentucky once again.
Yes, the Kentucky Speedway. Ross Chastain finished 3rd yesterday.
Boring track. All the speed was on the upper groove, David. Didn't make for a lot of passing last night.
They also announced yesterday that they're taking Watkins Glen off the schedule this year, and they're replacing it with the Daytona Road Course. Miller and Moulton. Have yourselves a great weekend. Thanks for listening, Fox Sports Radio.
Talk to you Monday, Jiro.
Guys, have a good weekend. See you on Monday.
Jiro, thanks. Great job. Have a great weekend. Be safe.
Thanks, everyone. Good questions.